My pack told me my mark meant nothing. That ancient tattoo on my skin was a curse, proof I was nobody. They laughed at it every single day, until the night the Alpha King grabbed my wrist, saw the mark, and the entire kingdom froze. Your mark means nothing. You're nobody. That's what the Silver Moon Pack told Arya Blackwood her entire life. But when the Alpha King saw the ancient tattoo on her skin, the whole kingdom would learn that some marks don't just identify you, they crown you. Before Arya's journey begins, a quick word. If stories of betrayal, healing, and reclaiming your power resonate with you, check out How to Find Peace After Being Betrayed by Someone You Trusted, a woman's path to letting go and reclaiming her power. Link in the description. Now, let's see how Arya transforms from cursed outcast to crowned queen. Arya Blackwood had learned to hide many things in her 23 years of existence. She hid her intelligence behind downcast eyes. She hid her strength beneath slouched shoulders. But the one thing she could never hide, no matter how many long sleeves she wore, or how many scarves she wrapped around her arms, was the tattoo. It wasn't a tattoo she'd chosen. It wasn't even a tattoo in the traditional sense. The mark had appeared on her 16th birthday, burning itself into her skin in twisted ancient symbols that spiraled from her right shoulder down to her wrist. The pack healer had called it a curse. The pack elders had called it a deformity. Her stepsister, the beautiful and perfect Celeste, had called it exactly what it looked like. Proof that Arya didn't belong. Cover that thing up. Celeste hissed that morning, her perfect blonde hair catching the sunlight as she prepared for the gathering. The Alpha King is coming to Silver Moon, and I won't have you embarrassing us with your affliction. Arya pulled her sleeve down without a word. She'd learned years ago that arguing with Celeste was like arguing with a storm, pointless and exhausting. Her stepsister had been chosen as one of the eligible she-wolves to be presented to Alpha King Daemon Nightshade, the most powerful werewolf in the 5 kingdoms. Every unmated female between 18 and 25 had been summoned to the pack grounds for his inspection. Well, almost every female. You're not actually planning to attend, are you? Her stepmother, Luna Margaret, appeared in the doorway, her lips curled in that familiar expression of disgust. The Alpha King is looking for a queen, not a whatever you are. Arya kept her eyes on the floor. Alpha Marcus commanded all unmated females to attend. I have to go. Alpha Marcus, Luna Margaret said with a cruel smile, also has eyes. He knows you're not queen material. You're barely pack material. If your father hadn't. She stopped herself, but they both knew how the sentence ended. If your father hadn't been the beta, if he hadn't made us promise to keep you, you'd have been exiled years ago. Her father, Beta Thomas Blackwood, dead for 7 years now, killed in a rogue attack that also claimed Arya's mother. The mark had appeared 2 months after their deaths, as if her grief had burned itself into her skin in a language nobody could read. The mark is demonic, the pack witch had declared when she'd examined it. Ancient and forbidden. Keep this girl away from important pack business. She'll bring nothing but darkness. And so Arya had been pushed to the edges of pack life. She cleaned the pack house kitchens. She tended the gardens. She served food at gatherings and then disappeared before anyone could really see her. She was the ghost of Silver Moon Pack, the cursed girl with the devil's tattoo. But today she couldn't hide. Today, the Alpha King had come to choose his mate, and pack law demanded every eligible female present herself, even the cursed ones. Arya dressed in the plainest dress she owned, a simple gray shift that made her look like a shadow. She braided her dark hair tightly and wrapped a shawl around her arms, covering the mark as best she could. When she looked in the mirror, she saw exactly what she'd intended, someone forgettable. Someone who would blend into the background while Celeste and the other beautiful she-wolves competed for the king's attention. The pack grounds were already crowded when she arrived. Hundreds of werewolves from Silver Moon had gathered to witness the selection, and the air hummed with excited energy. A massive platform had been erected in the center of the clearing, draped in royal purple banners bearing the nightshade crest, a silver wolf beneath a blood moon. "Look who decided to show up," a voice sneered her. Arya didn't need to turn around to know it was Raven, one of Celeste's closest friends. "Did nobody tell you this was for eligible females, not cursed rejects?" Laughter rippled through the she-wolves nearby. Arya felt heat rise in her cheeks, but kept walking, finding a spot at the very back of the gathered females. She could feel eyes on her, feel the whispers like spiderwebs brushing across her skin. "There's the marked girl, the cursed one. What is she even doing here?" A horn sounded, deep and resonant, and the crowd fell silent. Alpha Marcus of Silver Moon stepped onto the platform, his weathered face grave. "Brothers and sisters of Silver Moon Pack," he began, his voice carrying across the grounds. "Today we are honored beyond measure. Alpha King Daemon Nightshade has chosen our pack as one of his stops in the royal mate search. As you know, the king has been without a mate for 30 years, and the kingdom grows restless. A king without a queen is a kingdom without an heir. A kingdom without an heir is a kingdom without a future." The crowd murmured agreement. Everyone knew the story. Alpha King Daemon had lost his fated mate before they could complete the bond, killed by the same rogue uprising that had destabilized the 5 kingdoms a generation ago. Since then, he'd refused to choose another, growing harder and colder with each passing year. Some said he was waiting for a sign. Others said he was waiting to die. "The king seeks a mate who is strong, intelligent, and capable of standing beside him as he rebuilds what was lost," Alpha Marcus continued. "He will meet each eligible female, personally. His choice, when made, will be final and binding." Another horn blast, and then he appeared. Alpha King Daemon Nightshade was not what Arya had expected. The stories painted him as a monster 7 feet tall, with scars covering his body and eyes that could kill with a glance. But the man who stepped onto the platform was something else entirely. He was tall, but not monstrously so. Perhaps 6'4", with broad shoulders and a warrior's build beneath his black ceremonial armor. His hair was dark as midnight, pulled back from a face that might have been carved from stone, all sharp angles and hard edges. But it was his eyes that stopped Arya's breath. Even from a distance, she could see they were an impossible silver, like moonlight given form. He looked bored. No, worse than bored. He looked like a man going through the motions of something he'd long stopped believing in. "Let the presentation begin," Alpha Marcus announced. One by one, the she-wolves were called forward. Celeste went first, of course, gliding onto the platform in a dress that probably cost more than Arya's entire wardrobe. She was stunning, golden and perfect, like a sun goddess descended to earth. She curtsied deeply, offering her throat in submission, and even from the back of the crowd, Arya could see her step-sister's triumphant smile. The Alpha King looked at Celeste for exactly 3 seconds, then looked away. "Next," he said, his voice deep and utterly disinterested. Celeste's smile faltered. She was ushered off the platform, confusion and anger warring on her perfect face. The parade continued. Beautiful she-wolves, one after another, each trying to catch the king's attention with displays of grace, intelligence, or submission. He rejected them all with the same single word. Next. Arya watched from the shadows, relieved that with each passing minute she became more invisible. Maybe they'd forget she was here. Maybe she could slip away before Arya Blackwood. Her blood turned to ice. Alpha Marcus was looking directly at her, his expression apologetic but firm. Pack law was pack law. Every eligible female had to present herself. The crowd parted as Arya walked forward, and she heard the whispers start immediately. "That's the cursed girl, the one with the mark. What is she doing here? This is embarrassing." Poor Alpha Marcus, having to present damaged goods to the king. Her legs felt like water as she climbed the steps to the platform. She kept her eyes down, kept her arms wrapped in her shawl, made herself as small as possible. If she could just get through this without drawing attention to the mark. Look at me. The Alpha King's voice cut through her thoughts like a blade. She raised her eyes slowly, expecting to see disgust or boredom or anger. Instead, she saw confusion. His silver eyes were locked on her face with an intensity that made her wolf, quiet and subdued for so long, suddenly surged to alertness inside her chest. "Your arms," he said quietly. "Uncover them." The crowd gasped. Arya's heart hammered against her ribs. "Your Majesty." That was not a request. His voice was soft, but carried absolute authority. "Remove the shawl." With trembling hands, Arya unwrapped the fabric from her arms. The mark blazed in the sunlight, those twisted ancient symbols that had marked her as cursed for 7 years. She heard the crowd's collective intake of breath, heard Celeste's delighted laugh from somewhere in the audience. He's going to reject her in front of everyone. He's going to humiliate her for daring to present herself with that thing on her skin. But when Arya finally looked up at the Alpha King, she didn't see disgust. She saw recognition. His silver eyes were wide. His face, that hard carved stone face, had gone completely pale. He took a step toward her, then another, until he was close enough that she could see her reflection in his eyes. "Where did you get that mark?" His voice was barely a whisper, but in the sudden silence of the crowd, everyone heard it. "It appeared on my 16th birthday." Arya stammered. "The pack healer said it was a curse." "I don't know what it." She didn't get to finish. The Alpha King had grabbed her arm, not roughly, but with a desperate urgency, and was staring at the symbols like they held the secrets of the universe. His fingers traced the spiral pattern, and everywhere he touched, the mark began to glow, not with darkness, with light, pure silver light that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. The crowd erupted in chaos. She-wolves screamed. Males shouted. Alpha Marcus tried to restore order. But nobody was listening because everyone was watching the impossible thing happening on the platform. The Alpha King dropped to one knee before Arya Blackwood, the cursed girl, the pack reject, the nobody with the devil's tattoo. And when he spoke, his voice carried across the entire clearing, silencing every wolf present. "The mark of the first Luna." He breathed, wonder and something like pain flooding his silver eyes. "It's real. After 300 years, it's real." He looked up at Arya, and she saw her entire world shift in his gaze. "You're not cursed," he said, and his voice broke on the words. "You're prophesied. Subscribe if you believe Arya deserves the truth about her mark, because people like Arya need an audience that won't abandon them when everything they've been told is a lie. Drop a comment if Arya's pain is your pain. 2, if you've ever been called cursed when you were actually chosen. Chapter 2. The Prophecy Unveiled. The silence that followed the Alpha King's words was so complete that Arya could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. 300 she-wolves stood frozen, their faces painted with shock, disbelief, and on Celeste's face, pure fury. Prophesied? Alpha Marcus was the first to find his voice, though it came out strangled. "Your Majesty, I don't understand. That mark has been examined by our best healers, our pack witch. They all declared it a curse. They were wrong." The Alpha King rose to his feet but didn't release Arya's arm. His grip was gentle, almost reverent, as if he was afraid she might disappear. Or perhaps they simply didn't know what they were looking at. "This mark." He turned Arya's arm so the crowd could see the glowing symbols. "This is the mark of the first Luna, written in the old tongue. It hasn't been seen since the Moonfall War 3 centuries ago." Arya's head was spinning. The old tongue? The Moonfall War? These were things from children's stories, legends told around fires to make pups behave. They weren't real. There must be some mistake. Luna Margaret pushed her way to the front of the crowd, her face pale but determined. "That girl is no one special. She's the daughter of a beta, nothing more. Her bloodline is common, her bloodline." The Alpha King interrupted. his silver eyes never leaving Arya's face, is anything but common. "Tell me, Arya Blackwood, what do you know of your mother's family?" Arya's mouth went dry. "Nothing, your majesty, she never spoke of them. My father said she was an orphan, raised by a traveling pack that dissolved before I was born." Something flickered in the king's expression. Satisfaction mixed with sorrow. An orphan with no history. A woman who appeared from nowhere carrying bloodlines she never spoke of. He finally looked away from Arya to address the crowd. The first Luna, Selene Moonborn, was betrayed by her own sister during the Moonfall War. Before she died, she cast a prophecy that her line would continue in secret, hidden and protected, until the kingdom was ready to be made whole again. The sign of her return would be the mark, the sacred symbols of the moon goddess herself, appearing on the skin of the descendant when the time was right. Fairy tales. Celeste spat from the crowd. Her beautiful face was twisted with rage. "You're going to choose her based on fairy tales? She's cursed, everyone knows it. She brings bad luck, darkness. She brings the return of the royal bloodline." The Alpha King's voice cut through Celeste's tirade like a blade. "The mark doesn't lie. It cannot be faked, cannot be replicated. It appears only on the true heir of Selene Moonborn, and only when the royal mate is near." Arya felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Royal mate? He couldn't mean. The prophecy states that when the mark appears and glows in the presence of the Alpha King, the bond is confirmed. The first Luna's bloodline and the king's bloodline reunited after 300 years of separation. He turned back to Arya, and she saw something vulnerable flash across his hard features. "I never believed it. I thought it was just another myth, another false hope. But here you stand, glowing with the proof of your heritage." "No." The word escaped Arya's lips before she could stop it. "No, this is impossible. I'm nobody. I've been told my entire life that I'm cursed, that I'm worthless, that you've been told lies." The Alpha King's voice gentled. "Lies meant to keep you small, to keep you hidden. Perhaps even lies meant to protect you, though those who told them didn't know what they were protecting you from." He glanced at Alpha Marcus. "When did the mark appear?" 7 years ago," Alpha Marcus said slowly, pieces clicking together in his mind. 2 months after her parents died in the rogue attack. The rogue attack that killed Beta Thomas Blackwood and his mate. The king's expression darkened. An attack that happened just outside Silver Moon territory, as if the rogues knew exactly where to find them. "Tell me, Alpha Marcus, did anyone ever investigate whether that attack was truly random?" The silence that fell was different this time, heavier, darker, filled with ugly implications. Arya's legs gave out. She would have collapsed if the Alpha King hadn't caught her, his strong arms pulling her against his chest. Through the shock and confusion, she felt it, the mate bond, snapping into place with such force that it stole her breath. Every nerve in her body lit up, recognizing him, knowing him in a way that transcended logic. "No," she whispered against his armor. "Please, no, this can't be real." "I know." His voice rumbled through his chest, and she felt his hand stroke her hair with unexpected tenderness. "I know it's overwhelming. I know you've been taught to see yourself as cursed, when you were actually hidden, kept safe until the time was right. But the bond doesn't lie, Arya. Can you feel it?" She could. Moon Goddess help her. She could feel everything, his heartbeat synchronizing with hers, his wolf calling to her wolf. 7 years of loneliness and pain suddenly finding their answer in his presence. It was too much. Too fast, too. This is ridiculous. Celeste's shriek shattered the moment. She stormed onto the platform, her perfect composure completely shattered. "You can't possibly believe this nonsense. She's lying, or the mark is fake, or... Come closer," the Alpha King said quietly, not releasing Arya. "Touch the mark and see what happens." Celeste hesitated, but pride drove her forward. She reached out one perfectly manicured hand toward Arya's arm and screamed. The mark flared with silver light so bright that everyone had to shield their eyes. Celeste was thrown backward, landing hard on the platform, her hand blistered and smoking. The mark of the first Luna protects itself from those with ill intent. The Alpha King explained calmly, though Arya could feel the tension in his muscles. It cannot be touched by those who wish harm upon its bearer. Another proof, if any was needed, that this is real. Raven and 2 other she-wolves rushed to help Celeste off the platform, shooting venomous looks at Arya as they went, but Arya barely noticed. She was too busy trying to process the impossible truth that her entire life had been built on lies. "I don't understand," she said, pulling back slightly to look up at the king. Up close, his face was even more striking, all hard planes and sharp edges, except for his eyes, those silver eyes that looked at her like she was something precious, something worth protecting. If the mark appeared 7 years ago, why didn't it glow then? Why now? Because 7 years ago, I was on the other side of the kingdom, dealing with the aftermath of the Northern Rebellion. His jaw tightened. The prophecy states the mark glows only in the presence of the Alpha King, specifically when the king is actively seeking his mate. 7 years ago, I was still closed off, still refusing to accept that I needed a queen. It wasn't until 6 months ago, when the council threatened to dissolve the monarchy if I didn't produce an heir, that I finally agreed to the royal mate search. So all this time, I've been walking around with the proof of who I am, and nobody knew because you weren't looking. Arya wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. I've been called cursed, shunned, treated like I was marked by darkness, when really I was just waiting. Waiting for me to stop being a stubborn fool. Something like guilt crossed his features. Waiting for me to accept what I'd lost and be willing to move forward. If I had started searching sooner, then perhaps the true rogues would have found her sooner. Everyone turned to see the Silver Moonpack witch, Elder Miriam, climbing onto the platform. She was ancient, her face a map of wrinkles, but her eyes were sharp as she studied Arya's mark. "I told this pack the mark was a curse," she said slowly, "because that's what it felt like, powerful, ancient, and beyond my understandings. But I also told Alpha Marcus to keep the girl close, to watch her carefully, not because I thought she was dangerous. She looked directly at Arya, but because I thought someone else might find her dangerous if they understood what she was." "You knew?" Arya's voice came out as a whisper. "I suspected. The symbols were too precise, too purposeful to be random. And then there were the dreams." Miriam's expression grew distant. "I saw a silver wolf and a shadow wolf circling each other across a field of stars. I saw a crown broken in 2, waiting to be made whole. I saw a mark that burned with moonlight." She refocused on Arya. "But dreams are tricky things, child. I couldn't be certain, and if I had spoken my suspicions aloud, someone would have come for her." The Alpha King finished grimly. The same someones who likely arranged for her parents' deaths when they realized what bloodline Arya carried. The crowd erupted into chaos again. Accusations flew, theories multiplied, and through it all, Arya stood frozen in the center of the storm, her cursed mark, her prophesied mark, glowing like a beacon for all to see. Alpha Marcus called for order, his alpha command rolling through the clearing. When silence finally fell, he turned to the king with barely concealed shock still written across his face. "Your Majesty, what would you have us do?" The Alpha King's arm tightened around Arya's waist, possessive, protective. "We return to the capital immediately. Every moment Arya remains here is a moment her enemies have to act. If there are traitors in Silver Moon who arranged her parents' deaths, they now know their secret is exposed. They'll be desperate. I'll assign guards," Alpha Marcus began. "No," the king's voice was absolute. "I trust no one outside my own king's guard. Arya travels under my personal protection, starting now." He looked down at her, and she saw the question in his silver eyes. "That is, if you're willing to come with me. I know this is sudden." I know you've been given no time to process any of this, but I swear to you, on my honor as Alpha King, that I will protect you, answer your questions, and help you understand your heritage. You have my word." Arya looked out at the crowd, at the faces of wolves who had shunned her, pitied her, called her cursed for 7 years. She saw Celeste's hatred, Luna Margaret's shock, Raven's disgust. She saw Alpha Marcus's guilt and Elder Miriam's knowing sadness. Then she looked up at the Alpha King, at Daemon Nightshade, the most powerful wolf in the 5 kingdoms, who had just declared her his prophesied mate in front of hundreds of witnesses. She thought about her parents, who had hidden her mother's true bloodline, even from each other. She thought about 7 years of being treated like she carried darkness when she'd actually carried destiny. She thought about the mark on her arm, glowing with silver light, finally recognized for what it truly was. "I'll come with you," she said quietly, "but I want answers, real answers about my mother, about the prophecy, about everything I've been denied." A small smile tugged at the corner of his stern mouth, the first real emotion she'd seen from him, beyond shock and protectiveness. "You'll have them, all of them, I promise you that, Arya Blackwood." He turned to address the crowd one final time. "Let it be known throughout the 5 kingdoms I, Alpha King Daemon Nightshade, have found my prophesied mate. The mark of the first Luna has appeared, and the bloodline of Selene Moonborn has returned. Any who threaten her threaten the crown itself. Any who harm her will answer to me personally." The formal declaration sent ripples of shock through the crowd, but there was no room for argument. The Alpha King had spoken. As he led Arya down from the platform, his king's guard materializing around them from where they'd been waiting at the clearing's edge, she heard the whispers start again. But they were different now. The prophesied mate. The return of the first Luna. The cursed girl was actually blessed. Everything we thought we knew was wrong. Arya glanced back once to see Celeste staring after her with such naked hatred that it sent a chill down her spine. Luna Margaret stood beside her stepdaughter, her face calculating rather than shocked. And in that moment, Arya understood with cold certainty that the Alpha King was right. Someone had killed her parents to keep her heritage hidden, and now that the truth was exposed, those same someones would do anything to make sure she never claimed her birthright. The game had just begun, and Arya Blackwood, no longer cursed, no longer nobody, was the prize everyone would be fighting to control. Chapter 3. Shadows of the Past. The journey to the capital took 3 days by carriage, and Arya spent every moment of it feeling like she was living someone else's life. The Alpha King Daemon, he'd insisted she call him during their private moments, had provided her with a carriage fit for royalty. Plush, velvet seats, curtains embroidered with silver thread, and a security detail of 20 King's Guard warriors who rode in formation around them like a mobile fortress. It was the most attention Arya had ever received in her life, and she didn't know whether to feel honored or terrified. Probably both. "You're thinking too loud," Daemon said from across the carriage. He'd been reviewing documents for the past hour, but apparently he could multitask between reading and monitoring her emotional state through their newly formed bond. "I can feel your anxiety from here." Arya pulled her attention away from the window, where the landscape had shifted from Silver Moon's forests to the rolling hills of the Central Territories. I'm fine. You're a terrible liar." He set down his papers and studied her with those unsettling silver eyes. "What's troubling you, besides the obvious being told your entire identity was a lie, discovering your prophesied royalty, and being bound to a mate you met 3 days ago?" Despite everything, Arya felt a small smile tug at her lips. "When you put it that way, I can't imagine why I'd be anxious at all." Something softened in his expression. Over the past 3 days, Arya had learned that Daemon Nightshade had exactly 2 modes. The Alpha King, cold, controlled, absolutely commanding, and the man beneath the crown, who appeared in brief flashes when they were alone. The man who had gently helped her into the carriage when her legs had been shaking. The man who had ordered the convoy to stop when he'd sensed she needed air. The man who looked at her sometimes like she was a puzzle he desperately wanted to solve. "Talk to me," he said quietly. "We're going to be mates, Arya, partners. That means I need to understand what's happening in that mind of yours." Arya twisted the fabric of her new dress, another gift from the king, this one deep blue silk that probably cost more than she'd earned in her entire life. "I keep thinking about my mother, about how she must have known what she was, what bloodline she carried. She chose to hide it, even from my father. Why would she do that? Why would she let me grow up thinking I was nobody when she could have prepared me for this?" Damon leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "I've been wondering the same thing. The more I consider it, the more I believe your mother was protecting you the only way she knew how." After the Moonfall War, Celene's remaining bloodline was hunted to extinction. The families who betrayed her wanted to ensure no heir could ever challenge the new order they'd established. What new order? The broken one. Bitterness crept into his voice. Before the war, the 5 kingdoms were united under a single crown, Celene's crown. The Alpha King and the First Luna ruled together, their powers balanced and complementary. When Selene was killed and her bloodline supposedly eliminated, the crown fractured. My ancestor took control of what remained, but without the Luna's bloodline to balance the kings, the monarchy has been incomplete, weaker. The Council of Alphas has spent 3 centuries slowly eroding royal authority, waiting for the moment they could dissolve the crown entirely. Arya absorbed this, pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. So my mother hid because if anyone knew she carried Celene's blood, they'd kill her. And you. Damon's jaw tightened, which is exactly what happened, I suspect, when someone figured out the truth. The question is, who knew, and how did they discover it? A knock on the carriage door interrupted them. Damon's entire demeanor shifted instantly, the man disappearing, the king emerging. "Enter." Captain Thorne, the head of Damon's King's Guard, opened the door. He was a mountain of a man, scarred and battle-hardened, with eyes that missed nothing. "Your Majesty, we're approaching the Crossroads Inn. Do you wish to stop for the night, or press on to the capital?" Damon glanced at Arya, and she felt his concern through the bond, worried that she was exhausted, that the journey was too much, too soon. She straightened her spine, refusing to be seen weak. "We can press on if needed," she said. "We stop," Damon overruled gently. "Arya needs rest, and I need to send advance word to the palace about our arrival. Captain, secure the inn. I want every guest vetted, every entrance watched." "Already done, Your Majesty." A hint of pride colored Thorne's gruff voice. "I sent scouts ahead 2 hours ago. The inn is cleared and secured." "Good man." Damon stood as the carriage rolled to a stop. "Have a private room prepared for Lady Arya, and Lady Arya will stay in the king's suite." A new voice interrupted. A woman appeared behind Captain Thorne, petite, dark-haired, with sharp features and sharper eyes. She wore the robes of a royal advisor, embroidered with symbols Arya didn't recognize. If the rumors about her identity are true, she cannot be housed in lesser accommodations. It would be a political insult before she's even presented to court. Damon's expression went glacial. "Advisor Chen, I don't recall summoning you to this journey." Arya's attention sharpened at the name. "Chen," the woman smiled, unbothered by the king's cold tone. "You didn't. But when word reached the capital that you'd found your prophesied mate, the council felt it necessary to send a representative to verify the claim and ensure proper protocols are followed." Her gaze slid to Arya, assessing and skeptical. "No offense intended to the young lady, of course, but you understand the council's concerns. 3 centuries of prophecy suddenly fulfilled by an unknown she-wolf from a minor pack? It raises questions." "The mark raised no questions," Damon said icily. "It confirmed everything. Marks can be faked. The temperature in the carriage seemed to drop 10 degrees. Arya felt Damon's fury through the bond, like a physical force, barely leashed. Are you suggesting I can't recognize the mark of the first Luna when I see it? That I would be fooled by some common trick? I'm suggesting, Chen said carefully, that the council requires independent verification before they'll accept such an extraordinary claim. Surely you understand, Your Majesty. The implications are enormous. If she truly carries Celine's bloodline, it changes everything. The balance of power, the succession, the very structure of our government. The council cannot simply take your word for it, no matter how absolute your authority. Arya watched the exchange with growing unease. The woman's words were respectful enough on the surface, but underneath ran a current of challenge, of barely disguised threat. The council wanted to control the situation, control her, and they'd sent Chen to make sure that happened. The council will have their verification, Damon said flatly. Elder Sage in the capital can examine the mark and confirm its authenticity. Until then, Arya is under my personal protection and will be treated with the respect due to the future queen. Are we clear, advisor? Chen's smile never wavered. Crystal clear, Your Majesty. I'll arrange for Elder Sage to be ready upon your arrival. She dipped her head in a mockery of a bow and withdrew. Captain Thorne gave Damon an apologetic look before closing the carriage door. The silence that followed was heavy. Arya could feel Damon's rage simmering beneath his controlled exterior, could sense him fighting to calm himself before he spoke. I'm sorry, he finally said. The council has been difficult since I announced the mate search. They see it as their last chance to seize control before I produce an heir and secure the monarchy. They'll test you, try to prove you're a fraud, or manipulate you into serving their interests. You need to be prepared for that. I'm not a fraud, Arya said quietly. I know. He met her eyes, and the intensity there made her breath catch. But they'll try to make you doubt yourself anyway. They'll dig into your past, question every aspect of your life, look for any weakness they can exploit. Politics in the capital are vicious, nothing like what you've experienced in Silvermoon. Arya thought about 7 years of being called cursed, of being shunned and humiliated, and pushed to the margins of pack life. I think I can handle vicious. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Yes, I think you can. He stood and offered her his hand. Come, let's get you settled for the night. Tomorrow we reach the capital, and then the real game begins. The Crossroads Inn was nothing like Arya had imagined. She'd expected something rustic, a simple way station for travelers. Instead, she found luxury that rivaled pack-house crystal chandeliers, polished marble floors, and staff who bowed so low their foreheads nearly touched the ground when Damon entered. The king's suite was on the top floor, isolated from the other rooms and guarded by 6 king's guard. Inside, it was more apartment than room, a sitting area with plush furniture, a dining table set for 2, and through an archway, a bedroom with a bed large enough to sleep 4. Arya stopped in the doorway of that bedroom, suddenly very aware that she and Damon were mates, that the bond between them hummed with unresolved tension, that despite everything happening around them, there was this attraction, this pull that had nothing to do with prophecies and everything to do with the man standing behind her. I'll sleep on the couch, Damon said quietly, reading her hesitation. I know this is all moving too fast. I won't. I'm not going to pressure you into anything physical before you're ready. Arya turned to face him, studying this powerful man, who had just offered to sleep on furniture far too small for his frame, out of respect for her comfort. The bond wants to be completed. The bond can wait. His silver eyes held hers. Yes. Traditionally, mates complete the bond quickly to solidify their connection. But you've had your entire world turned upside down in 3 days. You need time to process, to understand what you're agreeing to. I can be patient, Arya. I've waited 30 years for a mate. I can wait a little longer to do this right. Something warm unfurled in her chest, gratitude mixed with growing respect for this man she barely knew, but was bound to for life. "Thank you," she said softly, "for understanding, for not pushing. Thank you for trusting me enough to come this far." He started to turn away, then paused. "Arya, there's something you should know about why I've been alone for 30 years. She waited, sensing this was important. "I had a fated mate once, before you." The words came slowly, painfully. Her name was Lyra. "We met when I was 23, newly crowned after my father's death. The bond was instant, overwhelming. I thought we'd have forever." "What happened?" "She was killed 3 months after we met, before we could complete the bond. Rogues attacked her convoy while she was traveling to the capital for our wedding. Everyone died, Lyra, her guards, her family. I was across the kingdom dealing with border disputes. By the time I got word and returned, there was nothing left but ashes." His voice had gone flat, emotionless in the way people get when they're talking about pain too deep for feeling. "I spent years hunting the rogues responsible. Found most of them eventually. But it didn't bring her back. And I couldn't. I couldn't open myself up to that kind of loss again. Until the council forced your hand." Arya understood. "Until the council forced my hand," he agreed. "I was content to rule alone, to let the monarchy die with me, but they threatened to dissolve the crown and divide the kingdom. Civil war would have followed. I couldn't let that happen, so I agreed to the mate search." He looked at her directly. "I want you to know, Arya, I didn't come to Silvermoon looking for a bond. I came looking for a political alliance, someone strong enough to be queen without expecting love. I wasn't prepared for you, for the prophecy, for any of this. And now?" Arya's heart hammered as she asked the question. "Now I'm terrified," he admitted, raw honesty in his voice. "Because the prophecy says you're my mate, and I can feel the bond between us, and I know it's real. But I also know what it's like to lose someone the bond has connected me to. The pain of Lyra's death nearly destroyed me, and that bond wasn't even completed. If something happens to you, if the people who killed your parents come for you too." He stopped, jaw working. "I don't know if I'd survive losing you." Arya crossed the distance between them, driven by an instinct she didn't fully understand. She took his hand, this powerful king's hand, and placed it over her heart, where the mark's glow was visible even through her dress. "Then we don't let them win," she said firmly. "You said it yourself. I'm not just your mate. I'm the heir to Celene's bloodline, the return of the first Luna. Whatever enemies killed my parents, whatever forces tried to erase my heritage, they're not going to get me, too. I'm stronger than I look, Daemon. 7 years of being treated like I was cursed taught me how to survive in shadows. Now I'm stepping into the light, and I'm not going down without a fight." He stared at her for a long moment, and then something shifted in his expressions. Surprise giving way to approval, respect, and something warmer that made her pulse quicken. "You're going to be a formidable queen," he said quietly. "I'd better be," Arya replied, "because something tells me the council isn't the only threat waiting for us in the capital." "No," Daemon agreed grimly. "They're just the beginning." Chapter 4. The capital's welcome. Arya woke to sunlight streaming through silk curtains and the disorienting realization that she'd slept better than she had in years. The bed was impossibly soft, the room warm and safe, and through the bond, she could feel Daemon's steady presence in the next room. A grounding anchor in the storm her life had become. She dressed quickly in another of the gowns he'd provided. This one deep emerald that made her dark hair look like polished onyx. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Daemon already awake, dressed in formal black armor, with the nightshade crest emblazoned on his chest. He looked every inch the warrior king, and Arya felt her wolf stir with appreciation. "We reach the capital in 2 hours," he said without preamble. "I need to prepare you for what you're about to face." Arya accepted the cup of tea he offered and sat across from him. "I'm listening." The capital Silvercrest is home to nearly 50,000 wolves, including representatives from all major packs, the Council of Alphas, and more political intrigue than you can imagine. When we arrive, you'll be presented to court immediately. No time to adjust, no quiet introduction. The council wants to verify your mark publicly, which means every eye in the kingdom will be on you. Verify it how? Elder Sage will perform a reading, a ritual that reveals the truth of ancient marks. If your mark is genuine, it will respond to the old magic and display its full power. If it's fake, he didn't need to finish. They both knew what failure would mean. And if I pass the test, then you'll be formally recognized as my betrothed and heir to Celine's bloodline. The coronation as queen will follow within a month after the traditional trials are completed. Arya's teacup paused halfway to her lips. Trials? Damon's expression grew grim. The ancient law requires that any would-be Luna prove herself through 3 trials, tests of wisdom, strength, and heart. They're meant to ensure the Luna is worthy to rule beside the king. Normally, they're ceremonial, simple challenges that any competent she-wolf could pass. But given the council's hostility, he trailed off meaningfully. They'll make them as difficult as possible. Arya finished. Try to make me fail so they can claim I'm not the true heir. Exactly. He reached across the table and took her hand, his touch sending warmth through the bond. I'll be with you through all of it. Whatever they throw at us, we face it together. You're not alone anymore, Arya. The sincerity in his voice made her chest tighten. 3 days ago, she'd been the cursed girl nobody wanted. Now she had the most powerful wolf in the kingdom promising to stand beside her. The reversal was dizzying. Together, she agreed softly. The capital appeared on the horizon like something from a dream. Silvercrest was built into the side of a mountain, its white stone buildings rising in elegant tiers toward the palace at the summit. The royal residence dominated the skyline, a massive structure of crystal and silver that caught the sunlight and threw it back in prismatic colors. Even from a distance, Arya could feel the power emanating from it. Ancient magic woven into every stone. It's beautiful, she breathed. It's a viper's nest, Damon corrected, though his tone held a note of fondness. But yes, it's beautiful too. My family has ruled from that palace for 8 generations. Soon it will be yours as well. As their convoy entered the city, Arya became aware of the crowds lining the streets. Thousands of wolves had turned out to catch a glimpse of the prophesied mate, their faces showing everything from curiosity to skepticism to outright hostility. She heard the whispers even through the carriage walls. That's her? She looks so ordinary. I heard the mark is a fake painted on by Silvermoon's witch. The king is being deceived. This girl is nobody special. If she's really Celine's heir, why has she been hidden for so long? Damon's hand found hers, his grip reassuring. Don't listen to them. They don't know you yet. Once they see your strength, once you prove yourself in the trials, they'll change their tune. And if I can't prove myself? The question escaped before Arya could stop it, giving voice to the fear that had been growing since they left Silvermoon. What if I'm not strong enough, Damon? What if the mark is real, but I'm not actually capable of being what the prophecy says I should be? He turned to face her fully, his silver eyes intense. Then we'll discover that together. But I don't believe for a moment that the moon goddess would mark you as the first Luna's heir if you weren't capable of fulfilling that destiny. The mark chose you, Arya. Trust in that, even when you can't trust in yourself. The carriage began climbing the winding road toward the palace, and Arya forced herself to take deep breaths to calm the panic rising in her chest. She was no longer the invisible girl from Silvermoon. She was about to be presented as the future queen of the 5 kingdoms, and there would be no hiding, no fading into the background. This was her moment to step into the light, or be consumed by it. This palace interior was even more breathtaking than the exterior. Arya barely had time to process the soaring ceilings, the tapestries depicting ancient battles, the channels of water that ran through the floors, reflecting light like liquid silver. Damon led her through corridors filled with servants who bowed and courtiers who stared until they reached a massive set of double doors carved with the images of two wolves, one silver, one shadow circling a crown. "The throne room," Damon said quietly. "Beyond these doors is the Council of Alphas, and most of the court. They've been waiting for our arrival." He studied her face, concern flickering through the bond. "Last chance to take a moment, catch your breath. I can make them wait if you need." "No." Arya straightened her spine, calling on every ounce of strength she developed during 7 years of surviving as an outcast. "I'm ready. Let's show them what a cursed girl can do." Pride flashed across Damon's features. He raised his hand and the doors swung open. The throne room was massive, easily large enough to hold 1,000 wolves, and it seemed like every single one of those 1,000 wolves was present, packed into the space, and all turning as one to stare at Arya as she entered on the Alpha King's arm. At the far end of the room sat 7 thrones arranged in a semicircle, the Council of Alphas, the most powerful pack leaders in the 5 kingdoms. Arya recognized the setup from her father's stories. The center throne was the Alpha King's, elevated above the others. The 6 surrounding thrones belonged to the council members, positioned to advise and theoretically balance the crown's authority. Currently, all 6 council members were present, their expressions ranging from skeptical to openly hostile. The only empty throne was Damon's. "Alpha King Damon Nightshade returns to court," a herald announced, his voice magically amplified to carry through the massive space. Accompanied by Lady Arya Blackwood of Silver Moon Pack, bearer of the mark of the first Luna and claimed mate of the Alpha King. The whispers started immediately, a rustling sound like wind through dead leaves. Arya kept her chin high, refusing to show the fear churning in her stomach. Damon led her forward, their footsteps echoing on the marble floor. As they approached the council thrones, Advisor Chen emerged from the shadows, that same calculating smile on her face. "Your Majesty, the council has assembled as requested for the verification ceremony. Elder Sage awaits your command to begin the reading. Then let's not keep them waiting." Damon's voice carried absolute authority. He turned to Arya, and for just a moment, his expression softened. "Remember, whatever happens, I'm here." An ancient woman stepped forward, so old she seemed almost translucent. This had to be Elder Sage, the most powerful seer in the 5 kingdoms. Her eyes were milky white, blind in the traditional sense, but Arya could feel the power radiating from her, the ability to see truths invisible to normal sight. Lady Arya Blackwood, Elder Sage's voice, was surprisingly strong for someone so frail-looking. "Approach and present the mark for reading." Arya stepped forward, acutely aware of hundreds of eyes, tracking her every movement. She removed her glove and pushed up her sleeve, revealing the mark in its full glory. The symbols seemed to sense the importance of the moment, beginning to glow faintly even before Elder Sage touched them. The old woman's blind eyes focused unnaturally on the mark. She extended one gnarled hand and placed it directly over the swirling symbols. The reaction was immediate and spectacular. Silver light exploded from the mark, so bright that wolves throughout the room had to shield their eyes. The symbols lifted from Arya's skin, floating in the air between her and Elder Sage, growing larger and more intricate with each passing second. Arya felt power surge her body, ancient and wild, the magic of the first Luna recognizing one of its own. And then she heard it, a voice that wasn't a voice, speaking directly into her mind in words she shouldn't understand but somehow did. "The bloodline awakens. The broken crown shall be made whole. She who bears the mark shall walk in shadow and light, shall face 3 trials, and shall restore what was lost. So was prophesied. So shall it be." The voice faded and the symbols slowly returned to Arya's skin, settling back into their usual pattern, but now glowing with permanent silver light that hadn't been there before. Elder Sage removed her hand and turned to face the council, her blind eyes somehow managing to convey absolute certainty. "The mark is genuine," she declared, her voice ringing through the throne room. "This woman carries the bloodline of Selene Moonborn, first Luna of the 5 kingdoms. The prophecy has been fulfilled. The heir has returned." The silence that followed was absolute. Then chaos erupted. Half the room burst into excited chatter, wolves discussing what this meant, how it would change everything. The other half erupted in protests and accusations, unwilling to accept what they just witnessed. From the council thrones, a male voice cut through the noise like a blade. "One moment, Elder Sage." Arya turned to see one of the council members rising, a massive alpha with gray-streaked hair and cold eyes. Everything about him radiated power and barely concealed hostility. Alpha Victor Ironjaw. Damon's voice dropped to a warning growl. "You have something to say?" "I do." Victor descended from his throne, moving with predatory grace toward Arya. "The mark may be genuine, but that only proves she carries Selene's blood. It doesn't prove she's worthy to be queen. The ancient law is clear. Any would-be Luna must pass the 3 trials before she can claim the crown." "I'm aware of the law," Damon said icily. "Then you're also aware that the trials can be adapted to suit the circumstances." Victor's smile was cruel. "Given the extraordinary nature of this claim, the council has voted to invoke our right to design trials worthy of testing a prophesied heir. After all, if she's truly meant to restore the broken crown, she should be able to handle challenges beyond the ceremonial nonsense we usually employ." Arya felt Damon's fury through the bond like a physical force. The trials are meant to test worthiness, not be instruments of sabotage. Sabotage? Sabotage? Victor's eyebrows rose in mock innocence. "Your Majesty, we simply wish to ensure that the woman who will stand beside you is truly capable of bearing the crown. Surely you want the same? It was a trap, and they all knew it." If Damon argued against the trials, it would look like he doubted Arya's abilities. If he agreed, he'd be letting the council design challenges specifically meant to make her fail. Before Damon could respond, Arya stepped forward. "I'll take the trials," she said clearly, her voice carrying through the throne room. "Whatever tests the council designs, I'll face them because I'm not afraid of proving myself to anyone. Subscribe if Arya's courage inspires you. Because women who've spent their lives being underestimated deserve an audience that believes in them when they finally step into their power." Drop a comment. What would you do if the council tried to sabotage your destiny? Victor's smile widened, predatory and satisfied. "Excellent. Then let the first trial begin immediately." "What?" Damon's control finally snapped. "That's not how this works. The candidate is entitled to 3 days of preparation between each. The ancient texts allow for immediate trials in cases of disputed succession." Advisor Chen interjected smoothly, appearing at Victor's side like she'd been waiting for this moment. "Given the extraordinary circumstances and the council's concerns about the validity of Lady Arya's claim, we invoke that right." Arya watched the pieces fall into place with crystal clarity. This had been planned from the moment Chen had appeared at the Crossroads Inn. The council had known exactly what Elder Sage's reading would reveal, and they'd prepared their countermove in advance. They were going to test her before she had any chance to prepare, hoping she'd fail publicly and discredit both her claim and Damon's judgment. She glanced at Damon and saw the same realization in his eyes, along with barely controlled rage. Through the bond, she felt his desperate desire to protect her, to shield her from what was coming. But she also felt something else, his belief in her, his certainty that she was stronger than the council suspected. "What's the first trial?" Arya asked, keeping her voice steady even as her heart hammered against her ribs. Victor's smile became absolutely vicious. "The trial of wisdom. You'll be taken to the archive of ancients and given 1 hour to solve a riddle." The riddle is written in the old tongue, the language of the first Luna herself. If you can read it and provide the correct answer, you pass. If you fail, he shrugged, then perhaps the prophecy was wrong after all. The old tongue, the language that had been dead for 3 centuries, known only to the most ancient scholars and apparently to those who carried Celine's bloodline. The mark on Arya's arm pulsed with warmth, and suddenly she understood. The voice she'd heard during the reading, the words she shouldn't have understood, but that had been the old tongue. The mark wasn't just proof of her heritage. It was a key, unlocking knowledge that had been sleeping in her blood for generations. "I accept the trial," she said firmly. Damon stepped closer, his voice for her ears only. "You don't have to do this now. We can fight their interpretation of the law, buy you time." "No." Arya met his silver eyes, letting him see her determination. "They want to see me fail while I'm unprepared and frightened. Let's show them what happens when they underestimate a girl who's spent 7 years being underestimated." Something fierce and proud blazed in his expression. He took her hand and raised it to his lips, a gesture of respect and faith that sent warmth flooding through her. "Then go show them who you are," he said softly. "Show them what it means to carry the first Luna's mark." As guards moved forward to escort Arya to the archive, she caught a glimpse of Advisor Chen's face. The woman was smiling, certain of victory. That smile was going to haunt Arya through what came next, but it was also going to fuel her determination to wipe it away. Chapter 5. The Trial of Wisdom. The Archive of Ancients was located in the oldest part of the palace, deep beneath the throne room, where the mountain's original stone formed the walls. As the guards led Arya down spiral staircases that seemed to descend forever, she felt the temperature drop and the air grow thick with age and magic. "The archive hasn't been opened in 50 years, one of the guards murmured, not unkindly. "Not since the last scholar who could read the old tongue died. Whatever riddle they've chosen for you," he trailed off, but his meaning was clear. "You're being set up to fail." Arya appreciated the warning, even if she couldn't acknowledge it. The guards weren't her enemies, they were just following orders. It was the council pulling the strings and Advisor Chen's smiling that calculating smile who wanted her to crash and burn before she could claim her birthright. The staircase finally ended at a massive door made of some dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Ancient symbols covered its surface, and Arya felt the mark on her arm grow warm, as if recognizing something familiar. Victor Ironjaw was waiting at the door, along with Chen and 2 other council members. Behind them stood Elder Sage, her blind eyes somehow tracking Arya's approach with unsettling accuracy. "The rules are simple," Victor announced. "You'll be locked inside the archive with a single riddle written in the old tongue. You have 1 hour to translate it and provide the correct answer. There are no reference materials inside, no aids of any kind, just you, the riddle, and whatever knowledge your bloodline supposedly grants you." His tone made it clear he believed she had no such knowledge. "What happens if I fail?" Arya asked, though she suspected she already knew. "Then you're proven unworthy to be Luna," Chen answered smoothly. "The mark may be real, but carrying Celine's blood doesn't automatically make you capable of ruling. The trials exist to separate heritage from competence. Fail this trial, and you'll be sent back to Silver Moon while the king continues his search for a suitable mate." In other words, the bond would be broken. Damon would be forced to reject her and choose another. Everything the prophecy promised would be lost. "And if I succeed, then you proceed to the trial of strength in 3 days' time," Victor said grudgingly. "Though I wouldn't concern yourself with that yet. No one without years of scholarly training has ever been able to translate the old tongue. Whatever trick you think your mark will perform, I assure you, open the door." Elder Sage's voice cut through Victor's speech. The ancient woman stepped forward, placing both hands on the dark metal. "The candidate is ready. Let the trial begin. The door swung open with a groan of ancient hinges, revealing darkness beyond. Arya took a deep breath and stepped forward, but a hand on her arm stopped her. She turned to find Elder Sage had moved with impossible speed to stand beside her. "A word of warning, child," the old woman whispered, her blind eyes somehow boring into Arya's. "The archive is not just a library, it's alive in its way. It remembers every truth and every lie ever spoken within its walls. The riddle you'll face isn't just a test of translation, it's a test of understanding. The old tongue doesn't just communicate words, it communicates meaning, intention, truth. Answer with your mind alone, and you'll fail. Answer with your heart and your heritage, and you might just survive." Before Arya could ask what that meant, Elder Sage stepped back and nodded to the guards. 1 hour begins, now. Arya stepped through the doorway into darkness. Behind her, she heard the door slam shut with a finality that made her stomach drop. For a moment, she stood in absolute blackness, feeling the weight of the mountain above her and the council's expectations pressing down like physical force. Then, light bloomed. Not from any torch or lamp, but from the walls themselves. Arya gasped as she saw them, thousands upon thousands of books, scrolls, tablets, all shelved in towering stacks that rose so high she couldn't see where they ended. The light came from the texts themselves, a soft golden glow that pulsed like breathing. "The archive is alive," Elder Sage's words echoed in her mind. This wasn't just a storage room for old knowledge. This was something far older, far stranger. She could feel it watching her, assessing her, waiting to see what she would do. In the center of the vast space stood a single pedestal, and on it rested a sheet of parchment that glowed brighter than all the books combined. The riddle. Arya approached slowly, her footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. As she got closer, she could see the symbols written on the parchment, the same twisted ancient characters that marked her skin, but arranged in patterns she'd never seen before. She reached the pedestal and looked down at the riddle, and something inside her shifted. The symbols seemed to move on the page, rearranging themselves, dancing in patterns that hurt to look at directly. But the mark on her arm burned with increasing heat, and suddenly Arya understood what Elder Sage had meant. She wasn't supposed to translate the riddle with her mind. She was supposed to feel it, to let the knowledge sleeping in her blood rise up and interpret meaning that went beyond simple words. Arya placed her marked hand directly on the parchment. The world exploded into light and sensation. She was standing in a forest at night, but the moon above was wrong, too large, too red, bleeding light like a wound in the sky. 2 wolves circled each other in a clearing. One was silver as starlight, beautiful and fierce. The other was shadow, made solid, powerful and dark. They should have been enemies, light and dark, order and chaos. But as Arya watched, they moved in perfect synchronization, 2 halves of a whole. "What am I?" a voice asked, the silver wolf's voice, but also something more, something that resonated in Arya's bones. The vision shifted. The silver wolf stood alone now, and around her other wolves bowed. She wore a crown of moonlight, but the crown was incomplete, half of it missing, leaving a jagged edge where something vital should have been. "I am the light," the silver wolf said, "but light without shadow casts no depth. I am the crown, but a crown cannot stand with only half its circle. What am I without my other half?" The vision shifted again. Now Arya saw the shadow wolf alone in darkness, powerful but incomplete. Around him, wolves fought and bled, kingdoms fractured and fell. The crown he wore was also broken, missing the same half that the silver wolf lacked. "I am the shadow," the shadow wolf said, "but shadow without light has no form to define it. I am the strength, but strength without wisdom becomes tyranny. What am I without my balance?" The 2 wolves began to circle each other again, drawing closer with each rotation. The red moon above them pulsed like a heartbeat. "What are we together?" they asked in unison. "What do we become when the broken crown is made whole?" when light and shadow, strength and wisdom, king and Luna stand as one. The wolves merged and Arya saw. She gasped and pulled her hand away from the parchment, stumbling backward. Her heart raced and the mark on her arm blazed with light, so bright it illuminated the entire archive. The riddle. She understood it now. Not just the words, but the meaning beneath them. The question that had been asked in 100 different ways over 3 centuries, waiting for someone who could truly comprehend the answer. What are we together? It wasn't asking about wolves or crowns or kingdoms. It was asking about the fundamental nature of power, of partnership, of balance. It was asking what happens when you take 2 incomplete halves and make them whole. Arya looked at the parchment again, and this time the symbols resolved into words she could read as clearly as her native tongue. I am half without my whole. I am strength without wisdom, light without shadow, crown without kingdom. Alone I am broken, together we are. The final word was blank, waiting for her answer. Arya thought about Daemon, the Alpha King, who had ruled alone for 30 years, growing harder and colder with each passing year, powerful but isolated, strong but lacking the balance that only a true mate could provide. She thought about herself, marked and prophesied, carrying the bloodline of the first Lunas, but raised in shadows. Told she was cursed when she was actually chosen, waiting without knowing what she was waiting for. She thought about the prophecy that had brought them together. The broken crown shall be made whole. Not repaired, not fixed, made whole. Because the crown had never been broken in the traditional sense. It had been incomplete, designed from the beginning to require both king and Luna, both shadow and light, both strength and wisdom working in harmony. Arya picked up the quill that lay beside the parchment. Her hand was steady as she wrote the final word in the old tongue, the symbols flowing from her fingers as naturally as breathing. Complete. The moment she finished writing, the parchment exploded into silver light. The words she'd written rose into the air, growing larger and larger until it filled the entire archive. Every book, every scroll, every tablet began to glow in response, and Arya heard something that sounded like singing, thousands of ancient voices joining together in recognition and approval. Truth, the archive whispered in a voice that was all those voices combined. The air speaks truth. The bloodline remembers. The crown will be made whole. The light was blinding now, pouring from every surface, and Arya had to shield her eyes. She felt power surge through her body, not just the mark's power, but something deeper. Knowledge flooding into her mind, generations of wisdom that had been locked away, waiting for an heir worthy to receive it. She saw the history of the 5 kingdoms in flashes. Selene Moonborn and her mate, the first Alpha King, ruling in perfect balance, the betrayal that killed Selene and shattered the crown. The 3 centuries of decline as the kingdom limped along with only half its leadership. The prophecy Selene had spoken with her dying breath. My line will return when the kingdom needs it most. When the crown is broken beyond repair, my heir will come to make it whole again. And she saw something else. Something that made her blood run cold. The face of Selene's betrayer. The sister who had killed her own blood out of jealousy and ambition. The face looked exactly like Advisor Chen. The door to the archive burst open exactly 1 hour after it had closed. Victor Ironjaw strode in with Chen at his side, both of them wearing expressions of barely concealed satisfaction. They expected to find Arya weeping over the parchment, defeated and proven unworthy. Instead, they found her standing in the mark on her arm blazing with silver light, surrounded by floating books that had arranged themselves in a perfect circle around her. The parchment, with the completed riddle, hovered at eye level. The word complete, written in symbols that pulsed with power. The satisfaction drained from Victor's face. Chen went absolutely white. Impossible, Victor breathed. You couldn't have. There's no way. The candidate has answered correctly, Elder Sage announced. appearing in the doorway behind them. The old woman was smiling. Actually smiling. For the first time since Arya had met her, the archives accepted her answer and recognized her right to the knowledge of her bloodline. The trial of wisdom is past, but she's had no training. Chen's composure finally cracked, desperation leaking into her voice. She couldn't possibly translate the old tongue without years of study. She must have cheated somehow, found some reference. The archive contains no references for the old tongue. Elder Sage interrupted calmly. It was designed specifically to prevent cheating. The only way to solve the riddle is through true understanding, granted by bloodline heritage, which Lady Arya clearly possesses. She turned those blind, all-seeing eyes on Chen. Unless you're suggesting the archive itself is lying, that would be a grave accusation, advisor. One might wonder why you're so desperate to see this candidate fail. Chen opened her mouth, then closed it, clearly realizing she was trapped. Any further protest would only make her look suspicious. Victor recovered first, his expression hardening. Fine. She passed the first trial through some trick of heritage, but the next 2 trials will test more than just bloodline knowledge. The trial of strength will require actual physical prowess, not just scholarly games. We'll see how the cursed girl from Silver Moon handles real combat. I look forward to it, Arya said quietly, meeting his hostile gaze without flinching. The knowledge the archive had given her was still settling into place, but one thing was crystal clear. These people had been trying to prevent her return for 3 centuries. They'd killed Selene, hunted her bloodline to near extinction, and spent generations consolidating power that should never have been theirs. And now they were terrified because their time was running out. 3 days, Victor said flatly. The trial of strength begins in 3 days. Enjoy your small victory while it lasts, girl. It will be your only one. He turned and strode from the archive, Chen hurrying after him, but not before Arya caught the look on the advisor's face, pure hatred mixed with something that looked almost like fear. When they were gone, Elder Sage approached Arya and placed a gentle hand on her arm, right over the mark. You saw it, didn't you? The old woman asked softly. In the vision, you saw the truth about what happened to Selene. Chen, Arya whispered. Or someone who looks just like her, the betrayer. Descendant of the betrayer, Elder Sage corrected. The bloodline that killed Selene has continued just as yours has, passing down her hatred and fear through generations. They know that if you succeed, if you truly restore the crown's balance, their stolen power ends. They will do anything to stop you, Arya. Anything. Arya thought about the vision, about the red moon bleeding in the sky, and the 2 wolves who were meant to be whole. She thought about Daemon waiting above for news of her trial. She thought about the prophecy that had brought them together, and the enemies who wanted to tear them apart. Let them try, she said firmly. I've been called cursed, worthless, nobody for 7 years. But I'm not that scared girl anymore. I'm the heir to Selene Moonborn, the first Luna's bloodline returned. And I'm not going to let anyone, not the council, not Chen, not the descendants of betrayers, stop me from claiming what's mine. Elder Sage's smile widened. Now that sounds like a Luna. Come, child. The Alpha King is probably tearing the throne room apart with worry. Let's show him that his mate is exactly as formidable as he suspected. As they climbed the stairs back toward the throne room, Arya felt the weight of what she'd learned settling into her bones. The trials weren't just about proving herself worthy. They were about surviving long enough to expose the conspiracy that had controlled the kingdom for 3 centuries. But she wasn't alone anymore. She had Daemon, had the bond, had the archive's knowledge flowing through her blood, and she had the mark, not a curse, but a crown waiting to be claimed. The council wanted war? Fine. They were about to learn what happened when you tried to bury a prophecy that had been 300 years in the making. Chapter 6: Shadows and Schemes. The throne room erupted when Arya emerged from the archive stairwell, with Elder Sage at her side. Damon was on his feet instantly, crossing the distance between them in 3 powerful strides. He didn't touch her, not in front of the entire court, but Arya felt his relief and pride through the bond like a physical embrace. "You passed," he said, and though his voice was controlled, his silver eyes blazed with emotion. "I passed," Arya confirmed. Then, more quietly, for his ears only, "and I learned things, important things we need to discuss privately." His expression sharpened, but he simply nodded and turned to address the court. "Lady Arya Blackwood has successfully completed the Trial of Wisdom, as verified by Elder Sage and the Archive of Ancients itself. Let it be known throughout the 5 kingdoms that the prophesied heir has proven her bloodline's knowledge. The second trial will commence in 3 days' time." The response was mixed. Some wolves applauded, genuine excitement in their faces at the prophecy's confirmation. Others looked troubled, uncertain what this meant for the political landscape they'd navigated for so long. And a significant portion, particularly those clustered near the council thrones, looked openly hostile. Victor Ironjaw stood from his throne, his face carved from granite. "The first trial is past, 2 remain. We adjourn until the trial of strength." His gaze locked on Arya with barely concealed malice. "Prepare yourself well, girl. The next challenge won't be won with riddles and bloodline tricks." As the court began to disperse, Damon placed a hand at the small of Arya's back, a gesture of support and possession that wasn't lost on anyone watching. "Come, you need rest, and we need to talk." He led her through a side door, away from the main corridors, with Captain Thorne and 4 Kingsguard falling into formation around them. They moved through passages Arya suspected few courtiers knew existed, finally arriving at a set of ornate doors guarded by 2 more Kingsguard. "The king's private chambers," Damon explained as the doors opened, "the most secure location in the palace. No one enters without my express permission." The chambers were stunning, less opulent than Arya had expected, but clearly designed for comfort and functionality. A large sitting area with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city below. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with texts that looked well-read rather than decorative. Through an archway, she could see a bedroom with that same massive bed that seemed to follow them everywhere. Damon dismissed the guards, and the moment the doors closed, his careful control cracked. He pulled Arya against his chest, his arms wrapping around her with desperate relief. "I felt your fear through the bond," he murmured into her hair. "Every moment you were in that archive, I felt you struggling, felt the weight of what you were facing. It took everything I had not to tear the doors down and drag you out of there." Arya let herself lean into his strength just for a moment. The trial had taken more out of her than she'd admitted, not just the mental challenge of solving the riddle, but the visions, the knowledge that had flooded into her mind, the weight of understanding exactly how deep the conspiracy against her bloodline ran. "I'm okay," she said softly. "Better than okay. Actually, the archive gave me something, Damon. Knowledge, understanding, but also," she pulled back to look up at him. "I saw who betrayed Selene, or rather, I saw whose bloodline betrayed her." His entire body went rigid. "Who?" "Someone who looks exactly like Advisor Chen." Arya watched his face carefully. "The archive showed me the past. Selene's sister consumed by jealousy, making a deal with rival pacts to kill the First Luna and shatter the crown. That sister's bloodline has continued just like mine has. They've been working for 3 centuries to ensure Selene's heir never returns to power." Damon's expression went absolutely glacial. "Chen, I should have seen it." She appeared at the Capitol 15 years ago, with impeccable credentials and a talent for political maneuvering. She rose through the ranks faster than anyone I'd ever seen, always positioning herself close to power, always whispering in the right ears. His hands clenched into fists. "She's been the council's primary advisor for the past 5 years. If she's descended from Selene's betrayer, Then she's been sabotaging the crown from within while I was too blind to see it. She's not working alone, Arya said. Victor Ironjaw is too coordinated with her. The way they move together, the way they had this trial planned, they're part of something bigger, a conspiracy that's had 300 years to entrench itself. Damon began to pace, his mind clearly racing through implications. The Council of Alphas was created after Celene's death, supposedly, to prevent any one ruler from having absolute power. But if the families behind that creation were the same ones who murdered Selene? He stopped pacing, turning to face Arya with grim realization. Then the Council isn't a check on the Crown's power. It's the organization that's been slowly dismantling it for centuries, waiting for the moment they could eliminate the monarchy entirely and divide the kingdom among themselves. And I'm the one thing standing in their way, Arya finished. If I complete the trials and claim my place as Luna, the crown becomes whole again. The balance between King and Luna is restored, and the Council loses the leverage they've been building for 3 centuries. Which means they'll do everything in their power to ensure you fail the remaining trials. Damon moved to the window, his silhouette dark against the fading sunlight. The trial of strength will be physical combat. Traditionally, it's a series of sparring matches against selected opponents, testing the candidate's ability to defend herself and lead warriors. But Victor will twist it into something far more dangerous. Can they do that? Change the rules like they did with the Trial of Wisdom? The ancient texts give the Council significant latitude in designing trials for extraordinary circumstances, Damon said bitterly. It's a loophole that's never been exploited before because previous Luna candidates were either ceremonial choices or political alliances. No one wanted to actually harm them. But you. He turned to face her. You represent the end of their power. They'll push every boundary, exploit every loophole, and if they can arrange for you to be killed during the trial and make it look like an unfortunate accident. He didn't need to finish. Arya's stomach clenched. Then, what do we do? I can't refuse the trials, that would invalidate my claim, but I also can't walk into an obvious trap. No, but you can prepare for it. Damon crossed to her, taking both her hands in his. 3 days isn't much time, but it's enough to give you a fighting chance. I'm going to train you myself, along with Captain Thorne and the best warriors in the King's Guard. We'll work on combat skills, yes, but more importantly, we'll work on survival. How to recognize sabotage, how to turn your opponent's strength against them, how to win when the fight is rigged. You think they'll actually try to kill me during the trial? I think they'll push you as close to death as they dare without making it obvious murder. His expression was fierce, protective. But they're making a critical mistake, Arya. They think you're weak because you spent 7 years being treated like you were cursed. They think your mark is your only real strength, that without it, you're just a scared girl from a minor pack. And I'm not? You survived 7 years of being shunned, belittled, and isolated. And you didn't break. You didn't become bitter or cruel. You learned to endure, to adapt, to survive in the shadows. His grip on her hands tightened. The Council sees a weakness to exploit. I see a woman who's already been through her trial by fire and came out stronger for it. They have no idea what they're actually facing. The conviction in his voice sent warmth through Arya's chest. For so long, she'd seen herself through Silver Moon's eyes. Cursed, worthless, broken. But Damon saw something different. He saw strength where others saw weakness, potential where others saw failure. I'm still afraid, she admitted quietly. Good. He raised one hand to cup her cheek, his touch gentle despite the warrior's calluses on his palm. Fear keeps you alert, keeps you cautious. It's only dangerous when it paralyzes you. Can you fight through your fear, Arya? She thought about stepping onto that platform in Silver Moon, knowing the entire pack expected her to be humiliated. She thought about walking into the archive, facing a test designed to make her fail. She thought about the vision of Selene, killed by her own sister's betrayal, and the 3 centuries of descendants who had waited for their chance to set things right. "Yes," she said firmly. "I can fight through it." His smile was fierce and proud. "Then we start training tonight. No time to waste if we want you ready for whatever throws at you." A knock on the door interrupted them. Damon's expression shifted back to the Alpha King's cold control. "Enter. Enter." Captain Thorne stepped inside, his scarred face grave. "Your Majesty, we have a problem." 3 of the King's Guard who were assigned to patrol Lady Arya's chambers have been found unconscious in a storage room. They were drugged, something fast-acting in their wine at dinner. Damon went very still, the kind of stillness that preceded violence. "Someone infiltrated the guard rotation." "It appears so, Your Majesty." "The guards are recovering, but it means we have a security breach. Someone got close enough to drug 3 trained warriors without being noticed." "Chen," Arya said quietly. Both men looked at her. "It has to be. She's been working in the palace for 15 years. She'd know the routines, know how to exploit them. She's sending a message. I can reach you whenever I want." "Then we change the game," Damon said flatly. He turned to Thorne. "Double the guard on Lady Arya at all times. No one approaches her without being personally vetted by you or me. She stays in my chambers where the security is tightest, and she doesn't eat or drink anything that hasn't been tested first. Assign someone you trust absolutely to food preparation and testing." "Yes, Your Majesty." "And the drugged guards? Keep them under observation, but don't let on that we know about the breach. If Chen thinks her sabotage went unnoticed, she might get careless. I want eyes on her at all times, who she meets with, who she talks to, where she goes. Something this coordinated requires planning and communication. If we can catch her making contact with her co-conspirators, we can map the entire network." Thorne finished with a grim smile. "I'll see to it personally." After Thorne left, Damon turned back to Arya. "I'm sorry. I should have anticipated this, should have known they'd move against you the moment you passed the first trial." "You can't predict everything," Arya said, though her hands were trembling slightly as the reality of the situation sank in. Someone had tried to get to her tonight. If those guards had been on active duty, instead of at dinner, if the drugging had happened during their patrol shift instead of before it, she pushed the thought away. Dwelling on what-ifs wouldn't help. "I need you to understand something," Damon said, his voice dropping to that intimate rumble that seemed to resonate in her bones. "From this moment forward, your safety is my top priority. Above politics, above the council, above everything. If it comes down to choosing between your life and maintaining peace with the council, I will choose you every single time. And if that means civil war," he met her eyes, "then we'll have civil war." The absolute certainty in his voice should have terrified her. He was talking about potentially destabilizing the entire kingdom to keep her safe. But instead of fear, Arya felt something else, a fierce gratitude that she finally had someone who would fight for her the way no one ever had before. "Let's make sure it doesn't come to that," she said. "Let's beat them at their own game, pass the trials, expose the conspiracy, and restore the crown before they can tear the kingdom apart." "Ambitious," Damon said, but there was approval in his tone. "I like it, but it means you need to be ready for anything they throw at you in the trial of strength, which means," he glanced toward the door, "we start your training now, tonight. Every hour between now and the trial could be the difference between survival and defeat." Arya squared her shoulders, feeling the mark on her arm pulse with warmth. The archive's knowledge was still settling into her mind, including fragments of combat techniques that Celine herself had known. She wasn't completely unprepared. Her bloodline had given her a foundation, but foundation wasn't enough. She needed to be able to execute, to adapt, to survive when the council stacked every odd against her. "Then let's begin," she said. "Show me how to be the warrior Luna this kingdom needs." Damon's fierce smile was the only answer she needed. They trained through the night in a private courtyard, deep within the palace grounds, protected by King's Guard and hidden from prying eyes. Damon didn't go easy on her. He came at her with the full force of his warrior's skill, teaching her through action rather than explanation. Arya lost count of how many times she hit the ground. Her body ached, her muscles screamed, and more than once she tasted blood from a split lip or bitten tongue, but each time she fell, she got back up. Each time Damon knocked her down, she learned something new about balance, about leverage, about reading an opponent's movements. And slowly, painfully, she began to improve. "You're thinking too much," Damon said after she'd attempted and failed to block his strike for the 10th time. "Your mind is fast, Arya, but in combat, thinking takes too long. You need to trust your instincts. Trust your body to respond before your mind has time to analyze." "My instincts tell me to run away," Arya panted, wiping sweat from her forehead. "No, they don't." He moved to stand behind her, his presence solid and warm at her back. His hands came to rest on her shoulders, and she felt the mate bond pulse between them. "Your instincts brought you through 7 years of survival in a hostile pack. Your instincts brought you through the archive when the council expected you to fail. Your instincts are exactly what you need. You just have to stop second-guessing them." He guided her through the movement again, his body pressed against her back, showing her how to shift her weight, how to use her smaller size as an advantage rather than a liability. The contact was electric, sending awareness racing through her nerves. But it was also grounding, a reminder that she wasn't facing this alone. Again, he murmured against her ear, "Stop thinking, just move." Arya closed her eyes, letting herself feel rather than analyze. She sensed Damon step away, sensed him preparing to attack, and when he moved, she responded not with thought, but with pure instinct. She spun, dropping low as his strike passed over her head, used his forward momentum against him, hooking her leg behind his knee and pushing. For the first time that night, the Alpha King hit the ground instead of her. The shock on his face was almost comical. Then pride blazed in his silver eyes, and he laughed, actually laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "There she is," he said, looking up at her with something that might have been awe. "There's the Luna who's going to show the council exactly what happens when they underestimate a woman who's already survived the impossible." Arya stood over him, breathing hard, her mark glowing in the moonlight. Around them, the King's Guard who had been observing the training were silent. But she could see respect dawning in their faces. She'd done it, not perfectly, not with the skill of a trained warrior, but she'd moved on pure instinct and succeeded. It was a beginning, and beginnings, Arya was learning, were far more powerful than endings. They were the moment when everything became possible. Chapter 7. The Trial of Strength. The 3 days before the Trial of Strength passed in a blur of training, strategy sessions, and escalating tension. Arya barely slept, spending every spare moment either in the courtyard with Damon and Captain Thorne, or studying the combat knowledge that had awakened in her bloodline. The mark on her arm seemed to grow brighter with each passing day, as if preparing for what was to come. On the morning of the trial, Arya woke to find Damon already dressed in his ceremonial armor, standing at the window overlooking the arena where the trial would take place. The massive structure had been built into the mountainside centuries ago, designed to hold 10,000 spectators for royal events. Today, it would be filled to capacity. Word had spread throughout the 5 kingdoms that the prophesied heir would face the trial of strength, and wolves had traveled from every territory to witness either her triumph or her destruction. "You don't have to do this," Damon said quietly, not turning from the window. Through the bond, Arya felt his conflict pride in her strength, warring with terror at the thought of losing her. "We could leave right now, take the King's Guard loyal to us, and disappear. Build a life somewhere the council can't reach us. Arya crossed to stand beside him, looking down at the arena below. She could see workers setting up weapons racks, combat circles, medical stations positioned at strategic points. Everything ready for bloodshed. You know I can't do that, she said softly. If I run, the prophecy fails, the crown stays broken, and 3 centuries of your family, trying to hold the kingdom together alone continues, until it finally collapses completely. She took his hand, threading her fingers through his. Besides, I didn't survive 7 years of being called cursed just to run away when things get hard. I'm seeing this through, Daemon, all the way to the end. He finally turned to look at her, and the raw emotion in his silver eyes made her breath catch. I love you, he said, the words seeming to surprise even him. I didn't think I could feel this way again after Lyra. Didn't think I wanted to. But you. He raised their joined hands to his lips. You walked into my life marked by prophecy, and proved to be so much more than destiny. You're brave and brilliant and stubborn as hell, and somewhere in the past week, I fell completely in love with you. Arya felt tears prick her eyes. I love you too. I didn't think anyone would ever see past the curse would ever see me. But you did. You saw exactly who I was, and you didn't flinch. Then let me fight for you in this trial. Let me be your champion. The ancient laws allow it. No, Arya squeezed his hand. This is my trial, my claim to prove. If you fight for me, it undermines everything. The council will say I'm too weak to deserve the crown, that I'm hiding behind your strength. She managed a small smile. Besides, you've spent 3 days teaching me how to survive. Time to see if I learned anything. Before he could argue further, a knock came at the door. Captain Thorne entered, his expression grim. Your Majesty, Lady Arya, it's time. The council is assembled, and the arena is full. They're waiting for the trial to begin. He paused, then added quietly, I've inspected every weapon, every piece of equipment. There are irregularities. Blunt blades that have been secretly sharpened, armor that's been weakened at critical points. Someone has been tampering with the trial setup. Chen, Daemon growled. She's making sure the accidents she plans will be fatal. I've replaced everything suspicious with equipment from our own armory, Thorne continued. But Your Majesty, I need you to understand. Even with proper equipment, this trial is going to be dangerous. Victor has assembled the 3 most lethal warriors in the kingdom as Lady Arya's opponents. These aren't ceremonial matches. They're execution attempts disguised as tests of strength. Arya had expected nothing less. Who am I fighting? First match, Kael Bloodfang, the Northern Territory's champion, undefeated in 57 consecutive battles. Thorne's scarred face was grave. Second match, Zara Nightstrike, the only female alpha in the 5 kingdoms, known for her ruthless efficiency and for never taking prisoners. Third match, he hesitated. Victor Ironjaw himself. The room went silent. Daemon's fury through the bond was a living thing, barely contained. The council leader is fighting in the trial? Arya asked, disbelief coloring her voice. That's allowed? Unfortunately, yes, Thorne said. The ancient texts permit council members to serve as trial opponents if they believe the candidate's claim is fraudulent and wish to personally test their worthiness. Victor invoked that right yesterday. It's a clear message. He intends to end this himself. Over my dead body, Daemon snarled. I won't stand by while he tries to murder you in front of the entire kingdom. You will, Arya said firmly, surprising both men. Because if you interfere, we lose everything. The council will declare the trial invalid, my claim forfeit. They'll force you to choose another mate, and everything we fought for disappears. She turned to face Daemon fully, letting him see the determination in her eyes. I know this is terrifying. I'm terrified too. But I have to do this, Daemon. Not just for the prophecy or the crown, but for every wolf who's ever been told they were worthless, for every underdog who was dismissed because they didn't fit someone else's vision of strength. I have to show them that survival is its own kind of power. Subscribe if you're ready to see Arya prove that the underestimated can become unstoppable. Because she's about to show the council what happens when you try to break someone who's already been through hell and chose to rise anyway. Drop a comment. Tell Arya what you'd do if you had to face 3 impossible battles with the whole kingdom watching. Daemon stared at her for a long moment, emotions warring across his face. Then he pulled her close, holding her like he might never let go. "You fight, then," he whispered against her hair. "You fight with everything you have, and I'll be there watching, believing in you every single second. And if Victor crosses the line from trial to murder," his voice went cold as winter, "then prophecy or not, I'm ending him." The arena was deafening when Arya walked out into the sunlight. 10,000 wolves had packed into the ancient structure, their voices rising in a cacophony of cheers, jeers, and speculation. Above the crowd, in a royal box draped with purple banners, sat the Council of Alphas with Daemon in the center throne. She could feel his presence through the bond, even across the distance, a steady anchor in the chaos. Victor Ironjaw stood at the edge of the combat circle, his smile predatory as Arya approached. "Welcome, Lady Arya, to the trial of strength. The rules are simple. Defeat 3 opponents in single combat. Surrender or death ends each match. There are no other restrictions." His eyes glittered with malice. "Your first opponent awaits." A massive wolf stepped into the circle. Kale Bloodfang, even larger than his reputation suggested. He stood nearly 7 feet tall, his muscles carved like granite, his eyes flat and emotionless, a killer's eyes. Arya stepped into the circle, refusing to show the fear churning in her gut. She wore simple leather armor protection without sacrificing mobility, and carried a short sword that felt both foreign and strangely familiar in her hand. The archive's knowledge whispered at the edges of her consciousness, showing her stances, techniques, movement patterns from Celene's own combat training. But knowledge wasn't the same as experience. She'd had 3 days of training against a warrior who hadn't wanted to truly hurt her. Now she faced a man who had built a reputation on breaking opponents without mercy. The horn sounded, and Kale attacked. He was fast, impossibly fast for someone his size. His first strike nearly took her head off, and Arya barely managed to duck, feeling the wind of his blade passing inches from her skull. She rolled away, tried to create distance, but he was already there, pressing the attack with relentless efficiency. "Stop thinking. Trust your instincts." Daemon's words from their training echoed in her mind. Arya stopped trying to analyze, stopped trying to predict. She simply moved, letting her body respond to threats before her mind registered them. Duck, weave, parry. She was faster than Kale, more agile. She couldn't match his strength, but she didn't need to. She just needed to survive long enough to find an opening. Kale's sword crashed against her blade, the impact nearly jarring the weapon from her hands. He was trying to overwhelm her with pure force, to shatter her guard and end this quickly. But with each blocked strike, Arya learned his rhythm. He was powerful, but predictable. Every attack followed a pattern, telegraphed by a slight shift of his weight. There, Arya saw the opening the instant before it appeared. As Kale wound up for another massive overhead strike, she didn't retreat. She moved forward, inside his reach where his size became a disadvantage. Her sword found the gap, between his armor plates, not deep enough to kill, but enough to shock. Kale roared, stumbling backward. Blood seeped from the wound in his side, not serious, but first blood was hers. The crowd erupted in noise, half cheering, half jeering. Arya didn't listen. She pressed her advantage, moving with a grace that surprised even her. The mark on her arm blazed with light. And she realized she wasn't just drawing on the archive's knowledge anymore. She was channeling Selene herself. 300 years of the first Luna's warrior skill flowing through her bloodline. Kale tried to recover, tried to use his superior reach and strength to regain control, But Arya was everywhere and nowhere, striking and fading, wearing him down with precision cuts that slowly painted him red. Finally, with a combination that seemed to flow from instinct rather than thought, Arya disarmed him. His sword clattered across the stone, and her blade came to rest at his throat. "Yield," she commanded, her voice carrying across the sudden silence of the arena. For a moment, Cale's eyes showed pure shock. Then, slowly, he nodded. "I yield." The arena exploded. Arya stepped back, chest heaving, hardly believing she'd won. But there was no time to celebrate. The horn was already sounding for the second match. Chapter 8. The Deadly Dance. Zara Nightstrike entered the circle like a hunting cat, all deadly grace and coiled violence. She was smaller than Cale, but somehow more terrifying, her movements promising pain rather than just defeat. Her twin daggers caught the sunlight, and Arya noticed they were serrated along one edge, designed not just to cut, but to tear. "You fought well," Zara said as they circled each other, her voice surprisingly soft. For a girl who's had 3 days of training, but Cale is a brawler, all strength, no finesse. "I'm different." Her smile was razor sharp. "I'm a killer, and there's a world of difference between the two." She attacked without warning, her twin daggers moving so fast. They were almost invisible. Arya barely got her sword up in time, managed to deflect one blade, but felt the other slice across her shoulder. Hot pain bloomed, and blood began to flow. Zara's smile widened. "First blood. Now let's see how long you last when you're already bleeding." This fight was nothing like the first. Zara didn't rely on strength or predictable patterns. She was chaos personified, attacking from impossible angles, creating openings where none should exist. Her daggers seemed to be everywhere at once, high, low, left, right, forcing Arya into a purely defensive position. Within minutes, Arya had a dozen small cuts across her arms, her sides, her legs. None were deep enough to be immediately dangerous, but each one bled. Each one sapped her strength, each one slowed her reactions just a fraction. Death by 1,000 cuts, Arya realized with growing dread. She's not trying to land one killing blow, she's bleeding me out, wearing me down until I can't defend myself anymore. "You're thinking too much again," Zara taunted, her daggers flashing out to open another cut across Arya's forearm. "I can see it in your eyes, trying to analyze. Trying to find a pattern, but there is no pattern, little Luna. There's only chaos, and I am its master." Arya's breathing was labored now, her movements slower. The blood loss was starting to affect her, black spots dancing at the edges of her vision. Through the bond, she felt Damon's terror, his desperate urge to intervene warring with his promise to let her fight her own battle. "I'm going to lose," she thought distantly as another cut opened across her ribs. "She's too fast, too skilled, too no." The word resonated in her mind, not her voice, but something older, deeper, the same presence she'd felt in the archive, the accumulated wisdom of every Luna who had come before. "You think you're losing because you're being cut, but every wound she inflicts requires her to commit to a strike. Every drop of your blood she draws is a moment when her blades are occupied. You're not losing, child. You're learning her rhythm beneath the chaos. Now stop defending and start seeing." Arya's eyes widened as understanding crashed through her. Zara's attacks seemed random, but they weren't, not truly. Every combination ended with a specific blade in a specific position, ready for the next strike. The chaos was an illusion, a performance designed to overwhelm and confuse. But Arya had spent 7 years surviving by reading the intentions beneath surface appearances. She'd learned to see the cruelty hidden behind Celeste's sweet smiles, the rejection masked by Luna Margaret's polite words. Reading Zara's true patterns beneath her chaotic performance was just another variation of the same skill. The next time Zara came in with her signature high-low combination, Arya didn't try to block both blades. She blocked the high strike and deliberately left herself open to the low one, but she wasn't there when the dagger arrived. She'd already moved inside Zara's guard, and her sword pommel caught the Alpha directly in the sternum. Zara stumbled backward, genuine surprise flashing across her face. Clever, but one hit doesn't. Arya didn't let her finish. She pressed forward, finally going on the offensive, and this time she wasn't trying to match Zara's speed. She was using her own advantages. The longer reach of her sword, the knowledge from the archive that showed her where to strike, the desperate determination of someone who had too much to lose to give up now. Their blades clashed in a deadly dance, sparks flying with each impact. The crowd had gone silent, every wolf watching in awe as the underdog candidate not only matched a legendary warrior, but began to drive her backward. But Zara hadn't earned her reputation by being easy to defeat. As Arya pressed her advantage, the Alpha suddenly changed tactics. She dropped low, inside Arya's sword range, and both daggers flashed toward Arya's exposed torso. It should have been a killing blow, would have been against anyone else. But Arya had one advantage Zara didn't know about, the mark. As the daggers came in, silver light exploded from Arya's arm, forming a barrier that caught both blades. For a frozen moment, they stood face to face. Zara's daggers pressed against light made solid, shock written clearly on the Alpha's features. "Impossible," Zara breathed. "No," Arya said, her voice steady despite the pain and exhaustion. "Just prophesied." She channeled everything she had, all her strength, all her will, all the power of the mark into a single headbutt that caught Zara directly in the nose. The Alpha's head snapped back, blood flowing, her grip on her daggers loosening for just an instant. That instant was all Arya needed. She swept Zara's legs out from under her, and as the warrior went down, Arya was already there. One of Zara's own daggers, now in her hand, pressed to the Alpha's throat. "Yield," Arya commanded, her voice carrying across the silent arena. For a long moment, Zara stared up at her, blood streaming from her broken nose, genuine respect dawning in her eyes. "You fight like someone who knows what it's like to be prey," she said softly. "Like someone who learned survival before they learned honor." A strange smile curved her lips. "I yield, Luna, and I'll be honored to serve you when you take the crown." The crowd erupted as Arya stepped back, her chest heaving, her body painted with blood from a dozen cuts. 2 victories, 2 impossible opponents defeated, but the hardest was still to come. The medical staff tried to approach, tried to treat her wounds before the final match, but Victor Ironjaw stepped into the circle and waved them away. "No healing between matches," he declared, his voice carrying across the arena. "The ancient texts are clear. The trial of strength tests endurance as much as skill. The candidate faces all 3 opponents in succession, carrying the damage from each fight into the next." His smile was vicious. After all, a true Luna must be able to protect her people, even when she's wounded, exhausted, and facing impossible odds. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some of approval, others of concern. Arya saw several council members shifting uncomfortably, clearly aware that Victor was pushing the boundaries of acceptable interpretation, but none of them spoke up to challenge him. Daemon was on his feet in the royal box, his fury visible even from across the arena. Through the bond, Arya felt him reaching the limits of his control, felt the Alpha King's protective instincts warring with his promise to let her fight. "I'm okay," she sent through the bond, though her body was screaming otherwise. "I can do this. I have to do this. He's going to kill you." Daemon's thought came back, raw with anguish. "That's what this is, Arya, not a trial, an execution. He knows you're weakened from the first 2 fights, knows you're bleeding. He's planned this from the beginning. Then let's show him what happens when you plan to kill a Luna and fail." Arya responded, drawing on reserves of courage she didn't know she possessed. "Trust me, Daemon. Trust that I'm stronger than I look." Victor drew his sword, a massive blade that looked like it could cleave a wolf in half, and began to circle. Unlike the previous opponents, there was no honor in his eyes, no respect for the trial or its purpose, just cold calculation and murderous intent. "Two opponents defeated through tricks and bloodline magic," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "But I've been fighting for 50 years, girl. I've killed rogues, traitors, and pretenders by the dozens. Your little light show doesn't frighten me." His smile was grotesque. "When I'm done with you, there won't be enough left to recognize, and the prophecy will die with you. Just like Celine died, screaming at her sister's hands." The casual mention of Celine's murder sent rage flooding through Arya's veins. This man was descended from the wolves who had betrayed the first Luna, who had shattered the crown and sent the kingdom into 3 centuries of decline, and he was proud of it. The horn sounded. Victor attacked with the skill of someone who'd been fighting since before Arya was born, combined with the ruthlessness of someone with everything to lose. His blade came at her from every angle, each strike powerful enough to shatter bone if it connected. Arya backpedaled desperately, her exhausted body screaming in protest, her wounds bleeding freely. She was slower now, the blood loss from Zara's cuts affecting her reactions. Victor's blade found her twice in the first minute, opening a gash across her thigh and another along her ribs. Not killing blows, but devastating nonetheless. "I can't win this," she thought as Victor's boot caught her in the chest, sending her flying backward. "He's too strong, too experienced, and I'm too wounded, too tired, too." She hit the ground hard, her vision swimming. Through the haze of pain, she saw Victor approaching slowly, savoring his victory. In the royal box, Daemon was being physically restrained by Captain Thorne and 3 other Kingsguard, his roar of fury audible even over the crowd's noise. "It's over," Victor said, raising his sword for what should be the killing blow. "The prophecy dies here. The council's power remains intact in you." His smile was grotesque. "You'll be remembered as the cursed girl who dared to dream above her station and paid the price." The sword began to fall, and time seemed to slow. Arya saw her life flash before her eyes, not the past, but the future she wouldn't have. Standing beside Daemon as true partners, rebuilding the kingdom together, finding other wolves like her who'd been told they were worthless, and showing them their true potential. All of it vanishing because she wasn't strong enough, wasn't fast enough, wasn't enough. The word echoed through her mind like thunder, and with it came a realization that hit with the force of revelation. She'd been fighting this entire trial, trying to prove she was strong enough, skilled enough, worthy enough. But that wasn't what the trial of strength was really testing. It wasn't about physical power or combat prowess. It was about the strength to keep fighting when every rational part of you said to give up. The strength to rise when you'd been knocked down. The strength to face impossible odds and refuse to quit. And Arya had been developing that strength for 7 years. Every day she'd survived being called cursed. Every moment she'd endured being shunned and belittled. Every night she'd gone to sleep alone and woke up determined to face another day. She was already strong. She'd always been strong. She just hadn't recognized it. The mark on her arm didn't just glow this time. It blazed, silver light so bright it was blinding. And with that light came power that dwarfed everything she'd accessed before. This was the true strength of the first Luna, not combat, skill, or magical, but the indomitable will that refused to be broken, no matter what forces arrayed against it. Victor's sword, inches from her throat, suddenly stopped. Not because he'd stopped it, but because Arya had caught the blade with her bare hand. The mark's power protected her, the silver light, forming a barrier that the steel couldn't penetrate. Victor's confident smile vanished, replaced by shock and the first flicker of genuine fear. "My turn," Arya said, and her voice resonated with power that was both hers and something far older. She wrenched the sword from his grip and surged to her feet. Her wounds were still bleeding, her body still exhausted, but none of that mattered anymore. The power of the first Luna flowed through her like a river, finally breaking through a dam, and she understood with crystal clarity what she had to do. This wasn't about defeating Victor. It was about showing the entire kingdom what happened when you tried to bury a prophecy that had been 3 centuries in the making. Chapter 9. The Crown Restored. Arya attacked, and this time there was no desperation, no improvisation, no fear. Every movement was precise, controlled, devastating. She was no longer the cursed girl from Silvermoon fighting to survive. She was the heir to Selene Moonborn, the prophesied Luna, and she was done being underestimated. Victor tried to defend himself, tried to use his 50 years of experience to counter her assault, but he was fighting not just Arya, but the weight of 3 centuries of suppressed destiny. Each strike she landed carried the force of every heir who had been hunted down, every Luna who should have ruled but was denied, every wolf who had been told they were worthless when they were actually chosen. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the wounded, bleeding candidate drove back the Council Alpha with relentless precision. Victor's confident sneer had vanished, replaced by growing desperation as he realized he was losing not just the fight, but everything he'd worked for. "This isn't possible," he snarled, his sword clashing against Arya's in a shower of sparks. "You're nobody, a cursed girl from a minor pack. You can't." "I can," Arya interrupted, her voice ringing with absolute certainty. "Because I'm not nobody, Victor. I never was. You just needed me to believe I was, so you could maintain your stolen power." She pressed forward, her strikes coming faster now, each one forcing Victor back another step. The mark on her arm blazed like a star, and wolves throughout the arena had to shield their eyes from its brilliance. "You want to know what real strength is?" Arya continued, her blade finding the gaps in Victor's defense with surgical precision. "It's not the power to dominate others. It's not 50 years of crushing anyone who threatens your control. It's the courage to face your fears, the determination to protect those who can't protect themselves, the refusal to break, no matter how hard the world tries to break you." Victor's back hit the arena wall. He'd run out of room to retreat. His eyes were wide now, genuine fear replacing his earlier confidence. "You can't kill me," he said desperately. "I'm a Council Alpha. Killing me would destabilize the entire political structure." "I'm not going to kill you," Arya said, and watched relief flash across his face. Then she smiled, cold and fierce. "I'm going to do something far worse. I'm going to let you live, disgraced and broken, so you can watch everything you tried to prevent come to pass, so you can see the crown restored, the council restructured, and a new era begin, one where betrayers like you have no place." With a move that seemed to flow from muscle memory older than her lifetime, Arya disarmed Victor with a twist of her wrist. His sword clattered across the stone, and her blade, his own weapon, taken from his hands, came to rest against his throat. The arena had gone absolutely silent. 10 wolves held their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. "Yield," Arya commanded, her voice carrying across the massive space. "Yield, and admit before this entire kingdom that you tried to murder me under the guise of a trial, that you and your council have been working for 3 centuries to prevent the prophecy's fulfillment, that you're descended from the bloodline that betrayed Selene Moonborn and shattered the crown." Victor's face went pale, then red with impotent rage. "You can't prove." Arya pressed the blade harder against his throat, drawing a thin line of blood. "The archive showed me everything when I solved the riddle. The mark gave me access to memories, to knowledge that's been waiting for the true heir to return. I know who you are, Victor Ironjaw. I know your family's role in Selene's murder. I know about the secret meetings with Chen, the plans to sabotage the trials, the attempt to drug my guards." Her voice hardened, "And I know that if you don't yield and confess right now, I will drag every piece of evidence before the entire kingdom and let them decide your fate." Movement in the royal box caught her attention. Advisor Chen was trying to slip away, But Captain Thorne and 6 Kingsguard blocked her path. They'd been waiting for this moment, positioned to spring the trap the instant Victor's conspiracy was exposed. "Your co-conspirator is already caught," Arya said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Either you yield and confess, or I end you here and now, and let the kingdom judge your corpse. Choose quickly, my patience is exhausted, and so is my mercy." For a long moment, Victor stared up at her with hatred burning in his eyes. Then slowly, that hatred gave way to resignation. He'd gambled everything on stopping her, stacked every advantage in his favor, and still she'd won. "I yield," he rasped, the words seeming to cost him everything. "And I confess, the council we've been working to maintain control, to prevent the prophecy's fulfillment, we believed." His voice cracked. "We believed the crown was better broken, that balance was a myth, that one ruler with absolute power was too dangerous." His eyes met Arya's, and for just a moment she saw not a villain, but a frightened old wolf who'd convinced himself his betrayals were justified. "We were wrong." The arena erupted into chaos, wolves shouting, some in triumph, others in disbelief. The council members in the royal box were on their feet, some trying to distance themselves from Victor's confession, others demanding order. But Arya only had eyes for Daemon. He was already moving, vaulting over the railing of the royal box and racing across the arena toward her. The moment he reached her, his arms wrapped around her, supporting her as her exhausted legs finally gave out. "You did it," he whispered fiercely, holding her against his chest like she might disappear. "Moon Goddess, Arya, you actually did it. 3 impossible opponents, a rigged trial designed to kill you, and you won. We did it." She corrected weakly, leaning into his strength. Her adrenaline was fading now, and the pain from her wounds was becoming overwhelming. Together, always together. The crowd's noise seemed to fade as Elder Sage appeared at the edge of the circle. Her blind eyes, somehow fixed directly on Arya. The ancient woman raised her hands, and silence fell across the arena like a blanket. "The trial of strength is complete," Elder Sage declared, her voice magically amplified to reach every corner of the massive structure. 3 opponents defeated not through tricks or deception, but through true strength of will, skill, and spirit. The conspiracy that has controlled this kingdom for 3 centuries stands exposed. The bloodline of Selene Moonborn has returned, proven beyond any doubt. She moved forward until she stood directly before Arya and Daemon, and something like awe crossed her ancient features. "The prophecy is fulfilled. The trials are past. The broken crown shall be made whole." She raised her voice to carry across the arena. "Hail Arya Blackwood, true heir to the first Luna. Hail the restoration of balance. Hail the prophesied queen." For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then a single voice from the crowd took up the cry. "Hail!" It spread like wildfire, thousands of voices joining together. "Hail! Hail the Luna! Hail the prophesied queen!" Not everyone joined the chant. Arya could see pockets of silence, wolves who had benefited from the council's corruption, and weren't happy to see its end. But they were the minority now, their power broken by Victor's public confession and the undeniable proof of the trials. Medical staff finally reached them, trying to tend to Arya's wounds. But she waved them off for just a moment longer. There was something she needed to say, needed the entire kingdom to hear. With Daemon's support, she stood and raised her voice to address the crowd. "Today you witnessed not just trials, but the exposure of a 3-century conspiracy. Wolves who were supposed to serve the crown instead worked to destroy it. Families who were supposed to protect the kingdom instead sought to control it." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But their time is over. The balance will be restored. The king and Luna will rule together as was always meant to be. And the council will be reformed, not eliminated, but restructured to serve rather than dominate." Her gaze swept across the arena, meeting the eyes of wolves from every territory. "I know many of you still doubt me. You see a girl who was called cursed for 7 years, who came from nowhere to claim a crown, and you wonder if the prophecy is real or just another grab for power. She raised her marked arm, letting the silver light blaze for all to see. Let me be clear. I didn't choose this destiny, it chose me. But I will spend every day of my reign proving I'm worthy of it, not through prophecies or bloodlines, but through actions, through justice, through the strength to protect those who can't protect themselves. The crowd erupted again, this time with genuine enthusiasm rather than uncertainty. Arya swayed, her vision swimming, and Daemon caught her before she could fall. "That's enough speeches for now," he said gently, scooping her into his arms. "Let's get you healed before you bleed out from sheer stubbornness." As he carried her from the arena, Arya caught one last glimpse of Victor and Chen being led away by Kingsguard, their heads bowed, their conspiracy shattered. 3 centuries of stolen power ending in a single day. It should have felt like victory, and it did. But it also felt like a beginning. The trials were over, but the real work of rebuilding the kingdom was just starting. Through the bond, she felt Daemon's pride, his love, and his determination to face whatever came next together. "Rest now," he sent through their connection. "You've earned it. Tomorrow, we begin the real battle, transforming this kingdom into what it should have been all along." "Together?" Arya sent back, though she already knew the answer. "Always together," he confirmed. King and Luna, shadow and light. 2 halves of a broken crown finally made whole. Arya let her eyes close, finally allowing herself to surrender to exhaustion. She'd passed the trials, exposed the conspiracy, claimed her birthright. But more importantly, she'd proven to herself and to the kingdom that strength came in many forms. That surviving 7 years of being called cursed had forged her into exactly the Luna the prophecy needed. That sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was refuse to stay broken. The mark on her arm pulsed one final time, warm and bright, as if Selene herself was acknowledging her heir's triumph. The cursed girl was cursed no more. The Luna Queen had come home. Chapter dishimt. The Luna's triumph. Arya woke 3 days later in the palace healing ward, her body wrapped in clean bandages and the worst of her wounds already knitting together, thanks to the royal healer's ministrations. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, and she could hear the sounds of the capital outside life continuing, the kingdom moving forward. Daemon sat in a chair beside her bed, his head resting on his folded arms at the edge of her mattress. He was asleep, exhaustion written in every line of his body. Through the bond, Arya felt the relief that had finally allowed him to rest, the certainty that she would survive, that they'd both made it through the trials intact. She reached out and gently touched his dark hair. His silver eyes opened immediately, and the emotion that flooded his face made her chest tighten. "You're awake," he said, his voice rough. "Finally. The healers said you'd recover, but 3 days of unconsciousness." He took her hand carefully, mindful of the bandages. "You terrified me, Arya. Watching you fight those battles, seeing you wounded and bleeding, and still refusing to quit. I've never been so proud and so terrified at the same time." "I'm okay," Arya said softly, battered and exhausted, "but okay. What did I miss?" Daemon's expression hardened. "Victor and Chen are in custody, along with 4 other council members who were part of the conspiracy. Captain Thorne found evidence in Chen's quarters correspondence with families descended from Selene's betrayers, plans for your assassination, records of bribes paid to keep the council compliant. It's worse than we thought, Arya. The conspiracy runs deeper than just a few ambitious wolves. It's generational families who have spent centuries consolidating power and teaching their children that the prophecy was a threat to be eliminated." Arya absorbed this, feeling the weight of what they were facing. How is the kingdom responding? Mixed reactions. About 60% support the restoration of the crown. They saw the trials, saw you win despite overwhelming odds, and they're ready for change. Another 30% are cautiously neutral, waiting to see what we do with the power we've claimed. The final 10%, he grimaced. They're loyal to the old council families, and they're not happy about the shift in power. There have been protests in 3 territories, and intelligence suggests some families are considering armed resistance. Civil war, Arya said quietly. The thing you were trying to avoid by agreeing to the mate search in the first place. Possibly, but there's a difference now. Damon's grip on her hand tightened. Before, I was trying to hold the kingdom together through political maneuvering and compromises that weakened the crown with every concession. Now we have the mandate of the prophecy, proof of the council's corruption, and popular support from the majority. If it comes to war, we'll have the moral high ground and the numbers to win it. Let's hope it doesn't come to that, Arya said. War means wolves dying. Good wolves who are just confused or scared or loyal to the wrong leaders. We need to give the dissidents a chance to see that the restored crown isn't about tyranny or revenge. It's about balance, justice, and protecting everyone, even those who opposed us. Something fierce and tender crossed Damon's face. This is why you're going to be an extraordinary queen. You just survived assassination attempts disguised as trials, and your first thought is mercy for the wolves who tried to kill you. Not mercy, Arya corrected. Strategy. The families behind the conspiracy need to face justice. Real consequences for 3 centuries of betrayal. But their followers, the ordinary wolves who were just following what they've been taught, they can be shown a better way. We break the cycle of hatred instead of perpetuating it. Before Damon could respond, a knock came at the door. Captain Thorne entered, his scarred face showing rare approval. Lady Arya, it's good to see you awake. The kingdom has been holding its breath, waiting for news of your recovery. I'm tougher than I look, Arya said with a small smile. What brings you here, Captain? Several matters, my lady. First, Cale Bloodfang and Zara Nightstrike have formally requested to swear fealty to you personally. They're waiting in the antechamber, if you're well enough to receive them. Arya exchanged a surprised glance with Damon. The warriors I defeated want to serve me? You defeated them with honor despite the trials being rigged against you, Thorne explained. In their eyes, that proves you're worthy not just of the crown, but of their personal loyalty. It's actually a significant political statement. 2 of the kingdom's most legendary warriors publicly choosing to serve the new Luna. Send them in, Arya decided. She struggled to sit up, wincing at the pull of healing wounds, but refusing Damon's attempt to make her stay lying down. If they're offering loyalty, the least I can do is receive them properly. A moment later, Cale and Zara entered. Both warriors looked uncomfortable in formal court attire, clearly more at ease in armor. They approached Arya's bedside and, in perfect synchronization, dropped to one knee. Lady Arya Blackwood, Cale said, his deep voice formal. I have fought 57 battles and never yielded before facing you. You defeated me not through superior size or strength, but through speed, precision, and the courage to take risks I didn't anticipate. It would be my honor to serve as one of your personal guard. Zara spoke next, her sharp eyes meeting Arya's without flinching. You fought like prey turned predator, someone who learned survival before learning honor. That's a lesson most warriors never understand, and it made you dangerous in ways I couldn't counter. I would consider it a privilege to protect a Luna who knows what it means to be hunted. Arya felt unexpected emotion tighten her throat. These were legendary warriors, wolves whose reputations alone could open doors or end conflicts. And they were offering to serve her personally, not because of the prophecy or political advantage, but because she'd earned their respect in combat. I accept your oaths, she said formally. But I need you to understand something. I'm not interested in warriors who follow orders without question. I want protectors who will tell me when I'm wrong, advisors who will challenge my decisions when they think I'm making mistakes, and companions who see me as more than just a crown to defend. Can you do that? Kale and Zara exchanged glances, something like surprise flickering across their faces. Then Kale smiled, a rare expression that transformed his brutal features. Most royalty wants soldiers, not advisors. You want partners. That's unusual. Spent 7 years being silenced and dismissed, Arya said quietly. I won't create a court where people are afraid to speak truth to power. So, yes, I want partners. I want wolves who will stand with me, not just behind me. Then you have us, Zara said simply. For as long as you'll have us, Luna. After the warriors left, Thorn delivered his other news. The coronation has been scheduled for 3 days from now, assuming the healers clear you for activity. Elder Sage insists the ceremony should happen during the full moon for symbolic reasons. The entire capital is already preparing. It's going to be the largest royal event in living memory. 3 days, Arya repeated, suddenly feeling the weight of what was coming. That's not much time. It's enough, Daemon said firmly. We've already waited 3 centuries. The kingdom needs to see the crown restored, needs the symbol of balance and unity, and you need to be formally recognized as Luna Queen before the dissidents have time to organize meaningful resistance. He was right, but Arya still felt unprepared. 3 days to transform from the cursed girl of Silvermoon into the crowned queen of the 5 kingdoms. 3 days to learn everything she needed to know about governance, politics, ceremony, and expectation. 3 days to become someone I never imagined I could be, she thought. Through the bond, Daemon sent reassurance and love. You already are that person, Arya. You just need to let the kingdom see what I see every time I look at you. The 3 days passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Arya met with advisors who were loyal to the crown rather than the council, learning the intricate web of alliances, debts, and obligations that governed the 5 kingdoms. She studied the formal protocols of coronation with Elder Sage, who proved to be surprisingly patient despite her intimidating appearance. She approved the restructuring of the council, reducing their numbers from 7 to 5, and implementing checks on their authority that hadn't existed before. And she met with representatives from every major pack, listening to their concerns about the changes coming and working to build bridges before they could become chasms. It was exhausting work, made harder by her still healing wounds, but Arya threw herself into it with the same determination that had carried her through the trials. She was learning that being queen wasn't about knowing everything. It was about being willing to learn, to listen, and to make difficult decisions even when you weren't certain of the outcome. On the evening before the coronation, as the full moon rose over Silvercrest, Daemon found her standing on the balcony of their chambers, looking out over the city below. Having second thoughts? He asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. About 50 of them, Arya admitted. I keep thinking about all the ways I could fail, all the wolves counting on me to be something I'm not sure I can be, all the expectations I might not meet. You know what I think? Daemon's voice was warm against her ear. I think you've been exceeding expectations your entire life. Everyone expected you to break under 7 years of being called cursed, but you survived. The council expected you to fail the trials, but you won. I expected to find a political alliance at Silvermoon, but I found my mate, my partner, my equal. He turned her to face him, his silver eyes intense. Stop worrying about meeting expectations, Arya. You're going to shatter them, just like you've shattered every limitation anyone has ever tried to place on you. Arya kissed him, pouring all her gratitude and love into the contact. When they finally broke apart, she felt steadier, more centered. Tomorrow we restore the crown, she said softly. Tomorrow I officially become Luna Queen. Tomorrow everything changes. Tomorrow we begin the next chapter, Daemon agreed. But tonight we rest. Together the way it should be. They stood on the balcony as the moon climbed higher, 2 wolves bound by prophecy, but choosing each other beyond destiny's demands. Tomorrow would bring ceremony and spectacle, politics and power. But tonight was theirs alone, a moment of peace before the storm of responsibility resumed. And as Arya looked out over the kingdom she was about to help rule, she felt the mark on her arm pulse with warmth. Not a curse anymore, never again. Instead, it was a promise to herself, to Daemon, to every wolf who had ever been dismissed or overlooked. The broken would be made whole, the outcasts would find their place, and the cursed girl, who had survived 7 years, in the shadows, would bring light to a kingdom that had forgotten what true balance looked like. Tomorrow, the prophecy would be complete. Tomorrow, the Luna Queen would rise. But tonight, Arya Blackwood simply stood with the man she loved and allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was exactly where she was meant to be. Epilogue. M.A. Foe. The crown made whole. The coronation place in the Grand Hall of Silvercrest Palace, a space so vast it could hold 5,000 wolves comfortably. Today, it held nearly 7,000, packed shoulder to shoulder to witness history being made. Representatives from every pack in the 5 kingdoms had traveled to attend, along with common wolves, who had simply wanted to see the prophesied Luna crowned with their own eyes. Arya stood in an antechamber, adjacent to the hall, her reflection staring back at her from an ornate mirror. She barely recognized herself. The gown had been crafted by the kingdom's finest seamstresses, silver fabric that seemed to flow like liquid moonlight, embroidered with symbols from the Old Tongue that told the story of Selene Moonborn and the prophecy of her heir's return. The neckline was cut to display the mark on her arm in all its glory, the symbols glowing softly against her skin. Her dark hair had been styled in an elaborate arrangement that somehow managed to be both regal and warrior-like, threaded through with silver chains that caught the light. But it was her eyes that struck Arya most. They looked different, stronger, more certain. The frightened girl who had stepped onto that platform in Silvermoon 3 weeks ago was gone, replaced by someone who had stared down impossible odds and refused to break. "You look like a queen," a familiar voice said from the doorway. Arya turned to find Elder Sage standing there, leaning on a staff carved with the same symbols that decorated Arya's gown. The ancient woman smiled, an expression that transformed her weathered features. "I look terrified," Arya corrected with a shaky laugh. "That too," Elder Sage agreed, moving into the room. "But terror and power often walk hand in hand. The wolves who should truly frighten us are the ones who feel no fear at all. They're the ones who make the worst decisions because they never stop to question themselves." She reached out and placed a gnarled hand over the mark on Arya's arm. "Selene was terrified the day she was crowned. I know I was there, though I was just a girl myself at the time. She told me she felt like a fraud, like everyone would see through her the moment she put on the crown." "What did you tell her?" Arya asked quietly. "I told her that feeling like a fraud was proof she was taking the responsibility seriously. That only fools and tyrants feel completely confident in their right to rule." Elder Sage's blind eyes somehow met Arya's perfectly. "You're going to make mistakes, child. You're going to face challenges you're not prepared for. You're going to doubt yourself and wonder if the prophecy was wrong to choose you, but you're also going to rise to meet those challenges. Learn from those mistakes and become the Luna this kingdom desperately needs. Not because you're perfect, but because you're willing to grow." Arya felt tears prick her eyes, but refused to let them fall. She'd ruined the carefully applied cosmetics. "Thank you for believing in me even when I couldn't believe in myself. Thank you for proving that 3 centuries of waiting wasn't in vain." Elder Sage squeezed her arm gently. "Now, shall we go make history?" The grand hall fell silent as Arya entered, every eye turning to watch her progress down the long aisle toward the dais where Daemon waited. He stood beside 2 thrones, the king's throne of black stone and silver, and beside it the Luna's throne of white stone and moonlight that hadn't been occupied in 300 years. Daemon wore formal armor polished to a mirror shine, the nightshade crest prominent on his chest. But it was his eyes that held Arya as she walked toward him, those impossible silver eyes filled with pride, love, and absolute certainty. "You're beautiful," he sent through the bond, "and terrifying. It's a remarkable combination. Just wait until you see what I do with actual power." Arya sent back and felt his warm laughter echo through their connection. When she reached the dais, Daemon took her hand and guided her to stand facing the assembled crowd. The silence was absolute, 7,000 wolves holding their breath, waiting to see the prophecy fulfilled. Elder Sage stepped forward, her voice magically amplified to reach every corner of the massive hall. 3 centuries ago, the first Luna fell to betrayal and the crown was broken. For 300 years, the Alpha Kings have ruled alone, growing harder and colder with each generation as the balance that should have tempered their strength was lost. For 300 years, the kingdom has slowly fractured, waiting for the moment when the bloodline would return and make whole what was broken. She turned to face Arya fully. The trials have been passed. The prophecy has been proven. The mark has revealed itself to the true heir. Before this assembly of the 5 kingdoms, I ask, Arya Blackwood, descendant of Selene Moonborn, do you accept the crown of the Luna? Do you swear to rule with wisdom and compassion? To balance the king's strength with your own? To protect the weak and guide the strong? To be mother to this kingdom and all its children? Arya's voice rang clear and strong. I do. On my honor, on my bloodline, and on the mark that chose me, I swear it. Elder Sage lifted the Luna's crown. A circlet of silver so intricately carved, it seemed to be made of frozen moonlight itself. Then, by the power vested in me as Elder Sage and keeper of the ancient traditions, I crown you Luna Queen of the 5 kingdoms. May your reign bring the balance we have lost and the peace we have sought. The crown settled onto Arya's head, and the moment it touched her skin, something extraordinary happened. The mark on her arm blazed with light so brilliant that wolves throughout the hall had to shield their eyes, but the light didn't stop there. It spread from the mark up her arm, across her shoulders, and throughout her entire body until she glowed like a living star. The Luna's crown responded, its silver catching and reflecting the light, creating patterns that danced across the ceiling and walls. And then, impossibly, a second light appeared, this one dark silver, almost shadow-given form. It emanated from Daemon, from the king's crown on his head, and as Arya watched in awe, the 2 lights began to spiral around each other, shadow and moonlight, strength and wisdom, king and Luna, 2 forces that had been separate for 3 centuries finally reuniting. Where the lights touched, they didn't fight or cancel each other out. They enhanced each other, created something greater than either could be alone. The very air in the grand hall seemed to shimmer with power, and Arya felt something shift in the fabric of the kingdom itself, ancient magic recognizing that the balance had been restored, that the crown was finally whole. Do you feel it? Daemon's thought came through the bond, filled with wonder, the power settling into place, the kingdom recognizing us as partners, not just rulers. I feel it, Arya sent back. I feel everything. The light slowly faded, returning to normal levels, and when Arya could see clearly again, she found 7,000 wolves on their feet, their voices raised in a cheer so loud it shook the very foundations of the palace. Hail the Luna Queen! Hail the restored crown! Hail Arya Blackwood Nightshade! Elder Sage stepped back, tears streaming down her ancient face. The prophecy is complete, she said, though her words were barely audible over the crowd's roar. After 300 years, it's finally complete. Daemon took Arya's hand and raised it high, presenting her to the kingdom. Then he did something that shocked everyone. He dropped to one knee before her, the Alpha King kneeling to his Luna in front of the entire assembly. I, Daemon Nightshade, Alpha King of the 5 kingdoms, swear my loyalty to Luna Queen Arya, Blackwood Nightshade. I swear to rule beside her as an equal partner, to balance her wisdom with my strength, to honor her counsel and respect her authority. I swear to be not just her mate, but her companion in all things. This I vow before the moon goddess and this assembly." The gesture's significance wasn't lost on anyone. For the first time in the kingdom's history, the Alpha King was publicly acknowledging the Luna as his equal. Not a consort, not a subordinate, but a true co-ruler with authority that matched his own. Arya pulled him to his feet, her eyes shining with emotion. "And I, Arya Blackwood Nightshade, Luna Queen of the Five Kingdoms, swear my loyalty to Alpha King Daemon Nightshade. I swear to rule beside him as an equal partner, to temper his strength with wisdom, to stand with him in times of trial and celebration. I swear to be not just his mate, but his companion in all things. This I vow before the moon goddess and this assembly." They turned to face the crowd together, hands joined, the mark on Arya's arm and the king's crown on Daemon's head, both glowing softly with renewed power. "Let it be known throughout the Five Kingdoms," Elder Sage declared, her voice carrying across the thunderous applause. "The crown is restored, the balance is renewed. The age of darkness and division has ended. The age of light and unity begins today." The celebration lasted 3 days and 3 nights. Wolves from every territory filled the capital streets, feasting and dancing, and celebrating not just the coronation, but the hope it represented. The council was formally restructured with new members who had proven their loyalty to the crown rather than their own ambitions. Laws were passed to protect those who had been marginalized under the old system, and quietly, efficiently, Captain Thorne and his King's Guard dismantled the remaining conspiracy networks, arresting those who refused to accept the new order. Victor Ironjaw and advisor Chen, along with the other conspirators, were tried and found guilty of treason. But in a gesture that surprised many, Arya exercised her authority as Luna Queen to commute their death sentences to exile. They would be stripped of all titles, lands, and authority, and sent to live out their days in isolated territories where they could do no further harm. "Mercy," Daemon had said when she denounced her decision, "is sometimes harder than vengeance, but it sends a powerful message that the new order is built on justice, not revenge." On the evening of the 4th day, when the celebration had finally wound down and the capital had returned to something approaching normalcy, Arya stood once again on the balcony of the royal chambers. But this time, she wore her crown, no longer a symbol of burden, but of possibility. Daemon joined her, slipping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "Any regrets?" he asked softly. Arya thought about the question seriously. 3 weeks ago, she'd been nobody, the cursed girl from Silvermoon, invisible and dismissed. Now, she was Luna Queen, with the weight of an entire kingdom on her shoulders and challenges ahead that would test every ounce of her strength. "No," she said finally, "no regrets. Fear, yes. Uncertainty, absolutely. But regrets, never." "Good," Daemon murmured against her hair. "Because I have plans for us, Luna Queen, big plans. Reforming the education system so children like you, overlooked and underestimated, get the support they need. Restructuring the pack hierarchies to prevent the kind of abuse you suffered. Creating programs to help rogues reintegrate into society instead of becoming permanent outcasts." "Ambitious," Arya said with a smile. "You realize all of that will take years, decades even. Then it's lucky we have a lifetime to work on it." His arms tightened around her. "Together." "Together," Arya agreed. If you followed Arya's journey from cursed outcast to crowned Luna Queen, subscribe to never miss stories that prove your past doesn't define your future. Because everyone deserves to see themselves in tales of impossible triumph and hard-won crowns. They stood in comfortable silence as the moon, full and bright, climbed higher in the sky. Somewhere in the city below, Arya knew there were still wolves who doubted her. Still families who resented the loss of their corrupt power, still challenges waiting to test the restored crown. But there were also wolves who had been inspired by her story. Young females who had been told they were too weak, too plain, too ordinary, who now believed they could be extraordinary, outcasts who saw hope for acceptance, underdogs who learned that survival was its own kind of strength. The mark on Arya's arm pulsed warmly, and she smiled. It had been called a curse for so long that she'd believed it. But curses didn't choose their bearers for greatness. Curses didn't unlock ancient power or fulfill 300-year-old prophecies. Her mark had never been a curse. It had been a crown waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. And now, finally, after 7 years of shadows and 3 weeks of impossible trials, Arya Blackwood Nightshade stood in the light. Not as the cursed girl nobody wanted, but as the Luna Queen her kingdom desperately needed. The prophecy was complete. The crown was whole, and the real work of healing a broken kingdom was just beginning. But that was tomorrow's challenge. Tonight, she simply stood with her mate and allowed herself one perfect moment of peace. She had earned it. They both had. And together, King and Luna, shadow and light, strength and wisdom united, they would face whatever came next. The broken crown was made whole, and in making it whole, Arya had finally found herself. Arya's story shows us that betrayal doesn't define us. How we rise from it does. If you're on your own journey of healing after betrayal, finding peace after someone you trusted broke your heart, I've linked a powerful resource in the description: How to Find Peace After Being Betrayed by Someone You Trusted. It's a woman's guide to letting go and reclaiming your power, just like Arya did. And if Arya's transformation from cursed to crowned inspired you, if you believe that underdogs deserve their moment of triumph, subscribe to this channel, because everyone deserves to see themselves in stories of impossible victories and hard-won crowns. Drop a comment telling me what moment in Arya's journey hit you hardest. Was it when she caught Victor's sword with her bare hand, when Daemon first recognized her mark, or when she showed mercy to those who tried to destroy her? Thank you for watching Arya reclaim her destiny. Until next time, may you find the courage to claim yours.